There you go. And that I noticed that like sometimes when I'm mired in the minutia of my own pain and suffering, it's hard to like pay attention to others. So, hey everybody, welcome to Public Access America. My name is Jason, his name is Jeffrey, and we get together once a week to talk about the week. And it's been an interesting week. We're waiting for our guest Dan, who's probably doing the Zoom connection problems thing like everybody seems to do. But I got
Mhm.
Jeffrey here and we're talking and we're having a good time anyway, so why not just hit record?
Right. Talking about the good times of having random pain that you just never know what to do with.
That's right. They just pop up. And sometimes they just go away. I one day I was doing dishes and I started having heart palpitations. And I always wondered if I thought I was going to die, what my reaction would honestly be. And I just turned off the heaters and the lights and laid on the couch. I was like, I guess I don't want, everything running if I die. But then the next day I took an Uber to the hospital and got an EKG and all that stuff.
That's probably a good idea. I mean,
Yeah.
like you just never know what's going to happen. Like
Hmm.
it's like if it's concerning enough that and it's continuing to happen, hey, you should probably go get that looked at.
Right.
Or if it just happens, once and it's random and then you never deal with it again, it's like, well,
That's
okay.
right. Or I know the solution to it. I was vaping way out of I was trying to stop smoking, so I started vaping, but I was in that weird phase of I'm smoking and vaping and getting high. And it was like that was a lot of stress for for
Your
my
body's
heart.
like, look, hold the
Yeah.
fuck on here. We can't be doing
Right.
all of this.
Right. And so I don't discount the jewel. I don't like say tell people they shouldn't use it, but man, that vaping thing is a bit out of control in certain demographics. So,
Well, I mean, the thing is that, it was meant as a way, in some cases, it's meant as a way for people to get away from smoking to begin with.
right.
It's been great for Debbie, for example, who was smoking like, I forget, like a pack and a half a day or something
Mm-hmm.
like that.
Right.
And now it's just like, you have something that you have, very few things that are actually in this. It's and of course you've had all of these different warnings come out, about how vaping is bad for you. And it's like, well, to put it lightly, if we're going to go on the putting things in your body is bad for you metric, if you're going to tell somebody, to choose between cigarettes and vaping, I think somebody's going to, I think people are going to eventually choose vaping instead of fucking cigs because number one, that scent goes away real quickly. Number two, you don't end up fucking up your nose. Like I'll never forget when Debbie had switched over and all of a sudden could like smell and taste food
Yeah.
again.
That is an amazing thing, isn't it? When I
Hmm.
was vaping, I was down to one cigarette a day. I always dreamed of the I Love Lucy theory. Come home from work, have a cigarette, relax. I don't drink. So it was like, I just want to get to that stage where I have one before I start my day and I have one before I end my day, before I shower and get ready. And so I got there and then yeah, I just gave up. I couldn't get to my vapes and I was like, well, I have cigarettes. And then I started rolling my own cigarettes with tobacco and now I'm smoking less of those. And it's a longer process. Like habits aren't cold turkey. It's finding the path for you and then eliminating it. My goal is to get to one every 2 hours and 40 minutes because that's a carton a month. And then I can go from there, right? So
Hmm.
now I'm on an hour. And so every hour I'll have one, even if I don't want one, because that makes my mind go, you didn't even want that last one. And then I go to 2 hours and then I'll go to three and then for
Hmm.
me, that's the process.
And for a lot of people, that's the process is just like, let's make it to 3 hours. It's like,
Right.
oh, didn't quite get there. All right, well, we reset the clock. Let's make it to three
Hmm.
hours.
Right.
And that's perfectly fine. There are very few things that, quitting cold turkey is going to work, and it is more dependent on the person than it is the actual, psychology, or physiology, I should say.
Yeah.
um because I know people who have just fucking quit cold turkey, and I'm like, Jesus motherfucking Christ. damn, like
Right.
no gum, no patch, no nothing. They just fucking tossed it and that was it. Game over. And I'm like, dude, holy shit. Like that's pretty impressive. But at the
Gums
same,
and patches are like they're substitutes for a new habit. So
mhm.
quitting cold turkey is cool. I did that with cocaine and it was like minute by minute. I was like, I want some. No, you don't. I want some. No, you don't. For days, it was just, I want some. No, you don't. So I started writing no at work on like beams and in the bathroom and stuff with my marker, just no. And I'd walk into a room and see the no and I'd be like, hey, thanks, Jay.
Hey, awesome. Thanks for the reminder. No, and even for me and my issues, it was like, why are you stressed out? X, Y, and Z. Why do you want to use that?
Hmm.
You really don't. So why are you thinking about it? Because it's something that I have used in the past. Like, well, you're still here. It hasn't worked.
Yep.
Do something else. And so I think in a lot of ways, video games became my way to distract myself from
Hmm.
doing certain things. Like I could dive in. Like, I mean, at one point I was playing, oh God, I would probably play video games anywhere from 12 to 15 hours a day,
I get
when I
that.
was at
Yeah.
my worst. And it was, I mean, in terms of habits, is it a great habit? No, but it was better than what I was doing.
Yeah, I think to myself, Little Big Planet might have saved my life that way. Because I just started playing that because you could make your own realms and then go through them, and then other people could go through them. So I spent my life just building these worlds for people to go through,
Mm.
instead of doing the drugs that I wanted to do.
For me, it was just online, like shooters, like playing Call of
Mm,
Duty, back when it was still playable to me.
yeah,
I played constantly, and I mean, I was good at it. I mean, I played in competitions, but
nice. You cream cheese or whatever his name is.
no. Um, but my group was good at it, and team stuff we did really well. We won championships, and that was that. And
Cool.
but it was before it really became like the esports thing that it is now. It
Hmm.
was more just informal competitions around around the country, and so it was just kind of like we fuck around and goof around, and it was fun. I enjoyed it. But
Hmm.
the new, as I got older, and that whole pressure of being able to perform like a competitor just changed for me. For me, originally it was, ooh, I'm interested. Then it was, ooh, I'm trying to distract myself from, thinking about old habits. And
Hmm.
now it's just like, you know what? If I, it's more about just me fucking around and having a good time. And so
Yeah.
it's just like, I don't, I'm still good. Like, for somebody who doesn't play as much as they used to, I'm still fucking good, but most of the time anymore, if I'm playing, it's me and a buddy and we're out fucking around just trying to, fuck with people and laugh. But
Right.
sometimes we hit serious mode and then the two of us just go, on as a fucking wrecking crew. Him and I will get together, and the one thing that always comes up is like in Battlefield, for example, if there's a tank available, put me in it.
Mm.
And I'll have him as my gunner slash gun sight person, and we will just go on a fucking wrecking spree. And
Wow.
especially if you get a couple other people who know what they're doing,
Hmm.
then you just end up with this tank crew that just fucking wrecks.
Wow.
And we'll have a good time, and we'll hit serious mode, or him and I'll just fuck around and like try to find people who are camping and just like do random weird shit.
That's so cool. I mean, I went the other way. I was in the top 10 on the online version of Tiger Woods. I was that good at that game. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I would play in competitions. People would actually like want me on their teams,
Hmm.
So yeah, I loved that and it was great for the time. I don't know. I'm not into games anymore, but I think that's because of my vision.
Well, I mean, yeah, I can understand that.
But
Yeah.
that's fine. There's other ways I can go with my vision. I just hey, before we get too far, the new suicide hotline
Oh yeah.
prevention line is 988 and our hourly tweet reflects that now.
Nice.
So it's just something that says somebody wanted me to tell you how amazing you are, so I told them I would tell you. You know,
No.
somebody thinks you're special even when you don't. And this line, I hope, helps that. So if you're on Twitter, you don't have to follow us at Public Access Pod, but if you could like retweet that, because we all have somebody in our lives that might be
Hmm.
considering this, that isn't talking to us about it and doesn't want to talk to anybody they know about it.
Right.
And so this line, I think, is crucially important in the grand scheme of things, of giving people that moment to think. So
So
thank
I want
you.
to explain a couple of things about this line too, because I've, definitely had some questions about it
Yeah,
personally.
cool.
And so 988 functions a lot like 911.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is that it's meant to connect you to local crisis centers. So
Cool.
like Washington has three. Each state will have a different number, and each state is unfortunately at a different level of preparedness for this. But the idea behind 988 is to help people who are in crisis, either to get the right services to them at the time that they need. So
Yeah, yeah.
instead of just having the cops show up to somebody who's having a mental health crisis, because that's honestly what has been happening. And
Mm-hmm.
people dial 911 because somebody's in crisis. Well, here you now are, you're going to have trained professionals, counselors, psychologists, things like that, that are meant to actually help answer and respond. And if you look up 988 and how your state is prepared for it, if you think that your state's preparation for 988 is inadequate, then make sure you're contacting your local lawmakers. Make sure that you're getting the funding that you need
That's
to
right.
help people in crisis. This
That's
is one
right.
of those things where, the National Suicide Prevention Hotline has been a great tool, but it needed to do more than it was doing. And this
Right.
is now the chance for, the United States to have something that's more dedicated and, I would say, in the actual right place, where you have trained professionals that are going to be answering these calls, and people who have degrees, and have
Mm-hmm.
studied this problem answering these calls.
Yeah. The issue with a government funded thing like this is that if we use it, they'll use the funding and they'll add more funding in following years as needed. But if we don't use it, they'll take that funding for something else and they'll consider it a loss and they'll leave it as it is, an inadequate state's separated function that isn't unified and evolving. So we
Hmm.
want to use it so that they can justify the funding for it. And I so keep it up and share it and help
Yep.
somebody. Because
Yep.
you never know who that person is until they're gone. And then you're like, I wish I could have done something. So on the top of every hour, we do something because I hate that guilt. You know, I've had friends that have considered suicide and I've had friends that I've talked down from it. And
Same.
it's a burden for somebody, the support system, to go through, because forever on you're wondering, you know what I mean? So
Right. And especially when you lose people too. Like
yeah.
it's real hard to, spend the rest of your life with the what ifs.
Hmm.
Here, there is a chance to have, better answers, better help.
Better
Um,
answers, definitely.
and better resources to get, the kind of help you need to the places that you need them,
Totally,
and
totally
easy to
agree.
remember.
988. That is so cool. So you got a fist bump for me, buddy?
A fist bump. Why do you want me to? Why do you want me to fist you? Wait.
Why would you fist bump a murderer? Anyway,
Oh my God.
this made me
Like,
think of the Middle East, and you know, it's going in two separate directions when it comes to Iran. And it seems like the US and Israel are on one side of this, let's maximum pressure Iran into not having nukes. And the rest of the Middle East is like, I think we're going to be chill, maybe have a barbecue and talk it over with them. Like
no.
Saudi Arabia seems to be like, we just want to talk to them. Go, do your thing. You know what I mean?
So here's where this gets really fun.
Yeah.
Um,
This is unexpected, by the way. I don't know where Dan is.
yeah. So whatever. We'll talk with Dan when Dan's around.
This is the last thing I saw on TV before I came in here, and it made me think, hmm,
So Saudi Arabia. So the thing about Iran and their nuclear program is that, number one, we have a desire to not have other countries get nuclear weapons because
Right.
number one, you never know who's going to sit behind the launch button, like
Less is
Vladimir
better
Putin. Yeah, definitely better. But number two, then you run into the issue of who's going to export nuclear technology. And in this case, there is an agreement, a standing agreement, that if Iran gets a nuclear weapon, Pakistan will be selling nuclear technology to Saudi Arabia. So
Hmm.
Saudi Arabia will become a nuclear power
Because of Pakistan.
because of Pakistan and Iran.
You know what's interesting about Pakistan, just as a segue? They are a conscience observer to the what is it? NATO, not NATO. The world organizations, the 198 countries, there's only two countries that's not in the UN, the United Nations. And one of
Mhm.
those is Pakistan. The other is the Vatican, which I find so interesting.
Well, yeah. I
How'd they
mean,
get the nuclear technology? And I thought Trump had already sold our Saudi Arabia nuclear technology.
no conventional weapons. We have a bar on selling nuclear technology.
I know
So
we
like
have that.
so and that's the thing is like you've got countries like Israel who've denied for a long time that they have nuclear weapons and
Hmm.
everybody's like, "No, we know you have them." And then you have countries like South Africa that actually had nuclear weapons and then they were like, "Nah, this is too fucking dangerous.
Right.
We
Or
need to get rid of this."
Ukraine, who had them and then negotiated them away.
Yeah, and realistically, that was kind of one of those things about like, the Soviet states was uh a real
Hmm.
interesting situation there because, the nuclear technology that they had, was the Soviet Union's, de facto Russia's.
Right.
And, I guarantee you that, right now Ukraine is kicking itself for making that deal in 94, but, at the
Right.
same time, I would say at that time there was a lot of momentum in, trying to reduce the nuclear threat to the world itself. I mean, even to this day, Mikhail Gorbachev, the last leader of the Soviet Union, still says that they shouldn't exist. Nuclear weapons shouldn't exist. They've done more harm than good.
Agreed.
And I don't disagree with that one bit,
But if they didn't exist, would we be in Russia right now? Hanging an American flag? They used that blackmail on us. They've been using it for since February. Don't come near us. We'll nuke you.
I mean,
That's the only thing that's protected Russia, I think.
no.
No?
Military doctrine is very interesting in that sometimes we're like, fuck it, we're going in, and other times we're like, nope, here's a clear objective, and this is what we're going to stick to.
Hmm.
Um, the first Gulf War, for example, we were we were posed to overrun Baghdad in the first Gulf War, but that was called off, and to say no, we are just liberating Kuwait,
Right.
pull our forces back to the line of control, and
That's cool.
leave that as, don't go in.
Right.
So, in a lot of ways, yes, there is that potential that we could have tried to invade Russia, but at the same time, too, our military doctrine most of the time is
Don't.
keep the country's borders preserved, not
Right. Subvert
push.
it. Subvert it with a third party candidate that's
Like
meant
if
to
you
take
have to,
over and topple the regime.
if you have to go into the other country to cut off supply lines and,
Hmm.
choke out the supply that's already in the country, that's one thing, but going in to take over the country is not an option.
Right. Just
and
to
and I think that's
destabilize it enough for the
and
people to make a choice.
well and and I think that's probably one of the wiser choices because, I mean, when you look at the course of military history, there's been nothing that has changed a regime faster than a swift defeat.
Right.
um you
Right.
know even when you look at, for example, the Falklands War, for example, where Argentina was under a military junta for a long time, and they got a quick victory by capturing the Falklands, or uh what do they, I forget what they call, uh the Falklands in Argentina, because they still assert that it's theirs.
Hmm.
But um
I don't remember. I would
I
never
don't
know.
I don't remember. I'd have to look it up. And and basically, like, when the British came down and straight up, kick, the British have a very, I wouldn't say adequate, because they're more than adequate, a
Hmm.
very seasoned navy that
Right.
is centuries of military, centuries of naval warfare as an
Oh,
island nation.
sure.
That I would say that if the British had the amount of naval forces that we had, for example, the only difference between us and them is that the Brits would have an additional, like, 300 years, 400 years of naval know-how that we don't. You
Right.
know, their navy has always been a top class navy.
Hmm.
And other countries have, kept up some of that practice, but a lot. I mean, when you think about, like, navies of the world, the Spanish used to have a hell of a navy, the French used to have a hell of a navy, the Dutch used to have a hell of a navy.
Yeah.
And as colonialism has fallen in a lot of what, as what we would call traditional colonialism,
Hmm.
I'm going to go take over your land, has fallen. A lot of those countries have reduced their navy to the point of, being more of a self-defense force, a self-defense
Hmm.
navy, or limited forward action navy. Whereas the United
Right.
States, we have not done that. We maintain a very large navy by, anybody's standards.
But we
I would.
also kind of rent out our military, our navy, our ships to camp out places to keep it safe.
Hmm. and
So.
that's and that's where, a lot of the whole issue of, why is America the world's police, when,
Hmm.
I would argue that, if Britain had a navy the size of ours, they'd probably be in the same position. You know,
Sure.
and now what you're seeing in the Pacific is the return of a lot of that ideology, where China is looking to expand into,
Yeah.
more of the
Yeah.
South
Yeah.
China Sea, and now you're seeing India develop a navy. You're looking at Australia really developing a navy,
Hmm.
and
Because
and
Australia is right there,
yep.
right in that zone, that Asian zone of China wants to take over Australia. Almost.
So now you have the British, the US, AUKUS, Australia, US, and UK,
Hmm.
uh, that are going to be developing joint technologies, to counter China.
Right.
So, and of course that's where you ran into that whole issue of, the French were looking at selling subs to the
Right.
UK, and Biden pulled a dumb fucking oops, and, like, whoops, sorry, we should have been talking with you and we didn't do that. That's on us. And it's like,
He's kind of full of dumb little oopses. That's how this started with the fist bump.
right.
Do you fist bump a murderer? Like it's optics, bro. It doesn't matter what you're saying in a photograph.
Right.
So, and that my point was, like, Russia is going to Iran to possibly purchase drones because they're having a problem with technology.
Hmm.
Like, and there's this coalition, and I like to call it the crypto coalition because it's like North Korea and China and Russia and now Iran and India. They're all moving into this separate dark economy system where they're teaming up to just fuck the Europeans, fuck America. We're just gonna do our own thing then. And that's
Hmm.
concerning to me on a longer term basis because Saudi Arabia is important and it seems like they're leaning towards the crypto coalition to
Well,
me.
I mean, the thing about crypto being as deregulated as it is it allows you to operate in spaces that you wouldn't
Right.
necessarily operate to begin with. I mean, unfortunately, you can have your currency exchanges below ground, but the problem is that, whatever goods you're going to exchange still have to take place above ground, and that's a lot
Right.
harder.
Yeah, no,
Um,
it's just an analogy. I used to tell my friend, he's like, my crypto's down. I was like, because there hasn't been any ransomware attacks yet. Like every time there's a major ransomware attack, go buy crypto because somebody's gonna pay.
right, exactly. And that's, and that's been one of the reasons why I have refused to get into crypto, is simply
Right.
because number one, it's insanely volatile.
Yeah. And you're
And
paying for
and
your own ransomware eventually.
and number two, I mean, realistically, like, you know, anybody, if you think that these things can't be cracked, or haven't been cracked already,
Hmm.
you're living in a dream world, because I guarantee you that a lot of this stuff has already been cracked and they're already able to trace it a lot better than they're letting on.
Oh, sure.
And the last thing I really want is to be on another fucking FBI watch list.
Yes.
It's kind of like all these different platforms that come out, and every single time a new one comes out, somebody goes, "Ooh, a new watch list. Ooh, a new
Uh-huh.
watch list." It was like, when Trump's first social media platform came out, "Ooh, a new watch list," and then that cratered,
Right.
and now you
That's
got
what
the
I was
next one. It's
thinking
like,
with truth. I was like, yeah, they of course nobody ever admits to being on truth, but everybody can report anything he says on it. You know what I mean?
right. And that's one of the, like, I refuse to sign up for that shit. Like,
Right.
there's just no way.
Mm-mm.
I already don't like the social media that I have,
That's
let alone
right.
going and sign up to throw myself into the fucking viper pit.
Right. That's my point.
Except it's more like an incest pit, I think.
I'm desocializing. Like I'm simplifying my social media so that I don't have to do everything everywhere because that's annoying as fuck to have to post something to Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest and Snapchat. And I sold my Snapchat stock. It went down to 14 bucks. It was up 89 bucks. They put the privacy, the do not track thing on, and now Snapchat can't make money.
Right.
So I dumped it because I prefer not being tracked over supporting an app that's going to track me.
Well, and that's just it. Is like, like I ended up buying something, and now I'm getting ads all. I bought myself a brand new guitar. Then
Yeah.
and I'm excited for that. But now I'm getting like ads all over the place. And then there was also something that I was looking up,
Hmm.
just because I had seen something and I was curious what it was. And I got a bunch of ads on my fucking Facebook now from that. And it's like, God damn it.
I don't get any of those, but I'm not on Facebook.
Hmm.
But you know what
So,
I did notice? A lot of the MAGA candidates or darker candidates, they're leaving Twitter and they're going to Facebook because Facebook is a safer zone for them.
hmm.
So yeah, I'm a Floridian now, and I registered to vote, and she asked me a question, do you need help voting? And I was like, yes. And she was like, okay, we'll mail you everything. And I was like, really? So I am going to get to vote in the primary. So I was looking up
Fantastic.
Floridian candidates, and I was looking at it's the primaries. Matt Gaetz is the incumbent here. And so I was looking at alternatives because Jeffrey, I'm going to be honest with you. She was like, Democrat or Republican, and my friend, I was like, what? And my friend was like, Democrat or Republican, and I was like, and he's like, no, that's neither. And I was like, yeah,
Yeah,
that's what
neither.
that's what I pushed. I was like, I couldn't bring myself to
No.
to pick either side. So I looked at the Republicans, and the alternative to Matt Gaetz was like angry MAGA, Georgetown MAGA. And so I asked him a couple questions he couldn't respond to. He's like, we're tired of the free money. And I was like, does that refer to the tax breaks or just people that actually pay their taxes? Like the tax breaks for the rich or the stimulus for the people? And he couldn't answer that. And I was like, all right, I'll give him some time. And then I looked up the Democrats and I was like, oh, she's a scientist, but she's not on Twitter. Her Twitter account is suspended, and now she's on Facebook, and that makes me worry.
Right. And that's like the worst part about this is like,
Uh-huh.
I was telling somebody yesterday, is like, and the worst part about trying to vote in, and I would say not even just voting, but just like being a member of humanity in general right now, is
Right.
you're told that you have to pick all of column A and all of
Uh-huh.
column B on an entire exam, when you're being told that there's only two columns, but you see
Right.
other columns. But if
Yeah.
you don't check all of column A or all of column B, you piss off somebody.
Uh-huh.
Like, it's like, you know,
Trump thought the election was stolen, but he's the only one that lost.
right. Or, out here we had, Kim Wyman, who is a
Hmm.
Republican that was our Secretary of State for God knows how long, that ran our elections.
Yeah.
And even she looked at this and went, nah, this wasn't stolen, period, end of story.
Right.
And and this is one of those things where I tell people constantly, the difference between stealing an election and losing an election because you don't like how it was run is very different.
Hmm.
It's buyer's remorse. You can agree to do something and then hate the fucking result.
Yeah.
Like that happens all the time.
And it happens
And
with 120 million people in the last presidential election that said, we don't like the candidates. We're not voting at all.
and my fear is that, the GOP is going to end up going with Trump for 2024,
Uh-huh.
and the Democrats are going to end up going for Biden in 2024. And a bunch of us are going to be like, fucking bullshit. This sucks so hard.
Yeah.
Because Trump ran the fucking country to a breaking point, and Biden has run it even further into the ground.
That's
And
what I want
so,
to. I always wanted that point to be made, by the way. Like, yes, our country is a shit show, but somebody spent 4 years creating that. And this guy is just not doing enough to dig us out. He
yeah, no.
can't. He can't because he doesn't have the Congress and Senate. The Senate and Joe Manchin are protecting him from doing
Well,
anything.
Biden's messaging
Right or
also hasn't
wrong? Right, right.
Biden's messaging also hasn't helped at all either.
Exactly.
Because for the longest time, he was the one person, like, if you're going to go this route, he was one of the biggest voices saying don't get rid of the filibuster.
Right.
And this is something that I've had to tell people time and time again. It's like, do I like the filibuster? No. But if your option is going to be pass a bunch of one-sided laws, then the next time the
Hmm.
Republicans are in office, they're going to repeal all of those laws and
Right.
pass a bunch of one-sided laws on their own.
And then they just become executive orders, not laws.
Exactly. Or you'll just have a Congress that spends its entire fucking time undoing what the last guy did. And
Right.
then they'll muscle through a bunch of their own shit. And
Hmm.
then when the powers that be switch, you're gonna have the same thing over and over. And I get it. The thing about, like, for example, the gun legislation that just got passed, you can make all the arguments in the world. Was it enough? And for some people the answer is going to be it was too much. For others, a lot of others, it's going to be no, it wasn't enough. But the fact of the matter is that you got to 65, was it 64 or 65 votes
Yeah.
on that legislation. You're not going to get that legislation undone, and that's the difference. That legislation is never getting undone.
Sure, that's the gold standard, but the opposition party, the party that opposes things, isn't going to let you do meaningful things that 97%, 93% of the country want. Like a woman's when a woman's life is at risk, giving her that medical option, they're saying no, and that's what 93
Well,
of us present. But a good point is that 7% is 33% of the Republicans' 22%. And the other
right,
thing is Republicans are 22% of the country, Democrats are 33% of the country. They're both minority parties.
right. And realistically, one of the things that people are going to have to keep in mind with all of this is that it's not just about getting to 65 votes. To me, the biggest problem is that, we have, as a smaller country, we had people go in and represent us. And
Hmm.
and I am one of those people that feel that we have grown to the point where we need more direct democracy. So when
Yes.
you have things like, whether abortion rights need to be codified into law, that should be something that gets pushed out on a ballot, and it's a federal measure, and
Hmm.
it's a federal directive. You
What?
are to do X, Y, and Z. And so if 65% of the country, 70% of the country, 80% of the country says codify Roe v. Wade into law,
Right.
well, then you have a directive. Now the question is, what are the two parties going to do in order to get the best of both worlds for their party?
Hmm. I
And that's one of those things, like, you want to know, you think about where we were and where we've now gone. We actually had some of the more liberal abortion laws out there in the world.
Oh
Germany, for
yeah,
example, is
agreed.
you still had medical abortion, but you couldn't have an abortion post 10 weeks unless there was a medical reason for it, or
I
rape or
I'm
incest.
I'm more than willing to have that argument. The
Right.
science-based argument that says we can preserve this life at 15 weeks, at 10 weeks. We can keep this fetus alive. You can't kill it because there's other options. I'm okay with that conversation. What I'm not okay with, I'm Christian and I don't believe that life-killing measures are right, and you have to agree with that. I don't like that.
It's
I
also
don't
the
I
same
don't
group
like
of
the
people that are like, oh yeah, but the death penalty's cool. It's like, you know that
right.
the death penalty is technically not cool if you're a Christian, right?
And they're okay with like post birth abortions, like
Yeah.
mass shootings, people killing people with guns. They seem to be okay with those kind of abortions. That's why I always try and tie that in. A mass shooting is just a mass abortion event, and it sounds disgusting, but when you think about it, you don't want guns anymore then because it's taking life too.
And that's the thing is
Sorry.
like I know Christians who, are, they don't like abortion and they don't like the death penalty and they fucking will they will march on that shit,
Mhm.
both sides. And I'm like, you know what? At least you're holding true to the conviction that you believe life is sacred. Okay.
I'm
I
not
can
gonna
respect
say
that.
I'm not gonna say whether I'm pro-abortion or anti-abortion. My job is in my life to make the decision. It's the freedom to choose. And thank you, Jay, for liking that tweet. Freedom is a freedom to use or not use. It's
Hmm.
that choice. That is freedom. Everything should be available. Should be up to us to decide in our own lives what we
And
use and don't use,
and
mistake
real
or not.
and realistically, there you run into the issue of like, maybe you start an organization that, they help support people until, they reach the point of birthing, and then they're the adoption agency. So that
Hmm.
way this person is as not as burdened as, they're going to be trying to navigate something that they really don't want to do. You know, there's always a different solution out there.
Hmm.
But the problem is that, what we've done is we've gone from there are safe accesses in these places to now there is no safe access. There's just going to be underground access.
Right. Yeah, because there's no scientific conversation allowed to be had about the gray area and making that clear. What if it was like pre-pregnancy, post-pregnancy, early pregnancy? Like 10 weeks, that's still an abortion to some people. It could be an early pregnancy to another person. You're just not ripping the fetus apart if you can keep it alive, right? And then it becomes somebody else's problem, not the mother's problem, not my problem, right?
And and this is it's just such a shit show, and
I agree.
there's so much that I could go into on it, but at the same time it's like
Mhm.
there are other voices out there that know far more about this, that are talking far more about this than
I agree, but I think
and
it's important to let women know that there is men, white men, men on their side. Like
right.
we have perspective of argument too, but we only have a limited perspective because you're not offering us yours to use.
Right.
So from my
Yeah.
perspective, a 10-year-old having to go from Ohio to Indiana because she got raped and had to have an abortion, and then we were gaslit into believing she didn't exist until a rapist was found, is a
Oh,
disgusting sort
that's
of thing.
that is a special breed right there, that, oh no, that's, this whole thing is fake news, and then they do this huge announcement that, oh
Right,
yeah, we actually caught the guy that did this. I'm like, what the fuck is this? What the
right.
hell?
And those
Like,
clips run all over CNN and MSNBC. Those two clips. She doesn't exist. Hey, praise hail the rapist. And so it's disgusting. Why not just give her access to health care, right?
well, this is what happens when you let, people's theocracy decide democracy, and that's the biggest
Uh-huh.
problem.
Yeah, it is the biggest problem.
So then here's my question: if somebody's religion states that abortion is a fundamental right, whose religion is correct?
That's right, because in Judaism it is. In the
Hmm.
Muslim religion it is.
Hmm.
Yeah. Oh,
So
fuck.
so if that's one of those things. Like, sorry, but if you're gonna approach this from a theocratic standpoint, then all
Mhm.
right, then there's a bunch of religions out there that are really cool with this, and you're going to have to accept that those places can then perform those services. Just imagine that.
Well,
You know,
yeah,
abortion clinics attached to synagogues and mosques and things like that. You want to talk about people getting fucking thrown up in arms? Jesus fucking Christ!
they were talking about having the VA do it,
There
like
was that.
attaching centers to the VA. Yeah,
Yep.
no, but here's the point to remember, and some of this is just estimated, but like 22% of Republicans, 7% that believes no exception is in the Republican Party. 22%, 7% in 22% is 33%, right? But 5% of those are evangelicals. Then they're all Republicans, and evangelicals, I'm estimating, can offer a lot of donation money. Like, I don't know what percent of the total revenue the RNC brings in, but evangelicals have to be a large proportion of that. Proportionately, Republicans have to pay attention to them more just because they're disproportionately a larger group in their group.
Hmm.
We don't have to think about that because evangelicals aren't trying to buy Bernie Sanders and AOC, right? They've decided to buy conservatives.
Hmm.
And
So.
where's the dark money? Like, if who's that Jewish guy that everybody's complaining about? Soros. If
Hmm.
Soros and Bloomberg were funding us, why aren't we winning more? You know? You know, and so people think Donald Trump wants to be president. I think Donald Trump wants to be the next Koch brother. You know what I mean? I think he's aiming to be a kingmaker without the fucking spotlight and glare of his
Oh
corruption.
no,
You know what I mean?
no, he wants to be king.
You
That's
think, yeah, but
no,
I don't
he
think.
wants to. He doesn't want king make. He doesn't want to be a kingmaker. He doesn't want any other king besides him.
Do you think
There's,
so? Because I
yep.
think I don't. I think he's
This
realized
guy,
that there is kings, and the kings aren't the
this
king.
guy is the thumbs up or thumbs down of MAGA candidates. Like, if anybody says they're MAGA, he has the final say on whether or not they are.
That's
That's the,
gross. I mean,
you
that's
know,
cool. That's cool.
and then of course, then you got people that are absolutely, they're out there claiming that they're more MAGA than MAGA, and I'm like,
That's
wow.
cool. Congratulations. I love the look on you. Get the mullet, buy a pet rock, get some parachute pants because you are living in niches, bro. Go for it. Go listen to Chumbawamba and some other college rock. I don't give a fuck. You can
So,
be MAGA all day long. It's a bad look. The young people aren't going MAGA. Latinos are going MAGA because that's what Republicans do. They ad bomb the Latino communities against the Democrats and call them socialists. So the Cubans go, oh, we don't like Democrats. Fine, go ahead. You know what I mean?
yeah, it's absolutely fucking
Common
wild to
sense
me.
rings out. And like Biden sucks right now. And people are going to be like, Trump sucks when he does nothing for us. And neither one of them ever have any plans to do anything directly for us. But I
Nope.
do prefer. So one of the MAGA candidates says we need to be energy independent and we can't rely on these dictator governments. And that was a MAGA candidate. And so my thought was, what do you mean? Because you don't like green energy. Like, if you're not going to promote green energy as a way of energy independence, then you want to drill more and ruin our national lands. And that's not conservatism. That's
Nope.
MAGA. That's not Republican. That's not conserving the land. That's destroying the land to make profit, not to get by, not so that we have just enough gas to get by, but enough gas to where Exxon can make $26 billion profit in 1 year.
And that's, and the funny thing is that I was out and about and I was listening to a couple old people talk about energy independence for the first time that I've ever heard, and they're talking about how Biden is screwing up our own energy independence. Now, of course, it was down to us not being able to drill, which, let's be real honest, like, the problem with creating renewable energy resources is that you still need a good solid source of petroleum in order to make a lot of those resources.
Of course.
And if you're not producing it locally, you're buying it internationally. And if you're buying it internationally, that means you're hoping somebody else has got the stuff that you need in order to secure your own energy independence. And that's not a good look either.
Can I ask a question?
Do it.
Joe Biden just went to OPEC to ask them to increase their production.
Yep.
Russia is a part of OPEC.
OPEC plus.
Yeah. How does that make sense?
So OPEC, so there's OPEC, then there's OPEC plus.
Right.
OPEC is Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait. Um, and I think there's one or two more in there, maybe Oman and Yemen.
Nah, I don't
But
know.
the Middle East is essentially,
Hmm.
is OPEC. OPEC plus is Iran, Russia, and Venezuela
Okay.
because they are it's kind of like NATO and NATO affiliate. It's OPEC and OPEC affiliate. It's why before COVID, you saw, Russia and Saudi Arabia get into a row over pricing. Russia didn't want OPEC to increase its price, increase its output
Production, right.
because it would affect what they were making on it. And so what happened is there was a row there, and then Saudi Arabia said, "Watch me tank your economy," and they fucking upped the production to the point where Russia wasn't making any money.
Right.
And then, they all decided to have a little powwow and, come back to the table and make things, nicer for everybody.
Uh-huh.
So, the thing is that if Russia, could be potentially pushed under the table by Saudi Arabia's production capacity and capability, we've known that's been the case. But now we have issues with, what does that mean for us? Because Saudi Arabia can also bury our production capability.
That's
The
my point.
difference,
Why should we drill and destroy our land for Saudi Arabia one day? Just be like, bye, you know?
well, here's the question. You know, what we have done, I would argue, is we have hedged a bet. And the bet has been that we will get our own production capabilities in place and we will leverage others until it's time for us to leverage ours. And basically what it boils down to is it's like, hey, somebody else has all of this infrastructure in place, somebody else has all this ability to turn on and off tap really easily.
Hmm.
Let's use their systems before we use ours.
Let's run them out before ours. Right.
It's a
My,
long game strategy, and it's, my dad working in the oil field in the 80s said that there were times where they would hit some oil wells that were real fucking barn burners that, and there's he was always convinced that, we had more oil than we were letting on. And when you had the early 2000s boom out, especially in the Bakken oil field out where I grew up,
mhm.
like it became very clear, we were told, oh, I remember watching the scare documentaries about how by, 2017 we'd be having problems, and by 2021 like there would be worldwide shortages, and by
Right.
2023 there would be fights. The problem is that there was never a shortage. The problem has it's not that there's been a shortage that's fucked with the pricing. The problem is that there has been control mechanisms and cartels in place that have, you
Right.
know and sanctions that have, there's the only thing stopping us from getting a shit ton of oil from Venezuela is the fact that we're not on good terms with the Venezuelan government. It's
Because, yeah,
closer,
because we back the
it's
other party.
it's closer, it's cheaper, and that cuts down on a lot of costs as it is.
Yeah.
If you were to take all the sanctions off Venezuela, all the sanctions off Iran, and all the sanctions off Russia tomorrow,
Yep.
the price of oil would bottom the fuck out. And
Yeah, it
that's the real
would.
answer.
It would. Right
Because
now, Russia gets
because
$1 billion a day for their oil. We didn't dent their ability to earn. The ruble is really high up there now.
it's crashing back down again.
Is it?
Yep.
Okay.
Because some of the other sanctions are really starting to bite now. But the thing is that, Russia's economy is a one trick pony, and it's been oil. Same with
Mhm.
Venezuela's economy, same with Iran's economy. They're one trick pony. That trick is oil.
And
And
that's
as
why
long as,
Russia's going to Iran for drones, you know? Yeah.
and so you end up having but you also, sanctions are only as good as the people who are going to abide by them.
That's
China's
right.
fucking buying their stuff. And
That's what I'm saying.
there's a reason why. It's like we've only inhibited the western half of the world from buying their oil. We have not stopped its ability to produce. But I guarantee you that if those sanctions were lifted overnight,
Right.
OPEC would shit a brick because Iran is going to produce a bunch because financially they've been hurting. Venezuela
Right.
is going to produce a bunch because they've been hurting.
Yeah.
Russia's going to produce a bunch because they've been hurting. And so Saudi Arabia and all of them are going to have to turn their taps up because that price is going to bottom out, which means they're going to have to
Hmm.
sell in order to keep their coffers full.
Because one of the biggest countries on the planet, China, is now buying just Russian oil, right? And we're not going to sanction them. But if you then said, okay, China, you can buy from whoever you want, Venezuela, Iran, Russia, anybody, I don't care, then that tanks the price and nobody
Mhm.
makes money off of it because China and the US are suddenly, and the European Union are buying from the cheapest person.
Yep.
Yeah.
Essentially, in a lot of ways, what has happened is that you've affected the ability to have a free market. Uh,
Right.
but even still, the problem is that that quote unquote free market also likes to play within a cartel. And
Hmm.
to me, you're never going to get that cartel to fucking play nice. And realistically, the only way that you're ever going to, show a bunch of middle fingers to the cartel is you have to create your own energy programs.
Yes.
And so when, as I've said this 100 times on this show, if your economy can be tanked by somebody else turning up the oil tap, you are not you are not an independent economy. Period. End of
Right.
story.
When I saw Joe Biden give a fist bump to Mohammed bin Salam, you know what my first thought was? Fuck you, Mohammed bin Salam. I want to go green. And fuck you. I don't ever want to use another one of your products. You know what I mean? That's the way I felt about it. I don't like begging the guy for help. I want to become so independent. Nobody's buying your product and you're
Well,
stuck with those barrels sitting there, you
and
know?
that's where I also say fuck you, Joe Biden, because you know he could, Biden could be saying, you know what, fuck it, we're going to put Americans to work doing the thing in America that we're going to, essentially
Right.
pay for. It's that we're going to do all the climate change stuff here, but we're just going to buy all the stuff that's killing the climate and bring it in
Right.
from somewhere else. It's bullshit. It's bullshit is what it is. It's I'm not okay with us doing it, but fuck it,
Right.
we'll let them do it, and we'll buy it and we'll do it.
Right.
That's all it is.
That other sideism thing is gross. They did that with Khashoggi. You know, like
Hmm.
Biden was tough on him about Khashoggi. And then, they were like, "Well, what about you? You did some horrible things and you took account for it and you prosecuted the people that were responsible and you moved on. Why can't we have done the same thing and prosecuted the people involved? You think the prince was involved. We're saying he wasn't. You have no proof publicly that he was. Can we move on now?" And part of me is like, yeah, kind of.
Hmm.
We know what you're capable of now, and we will protect our people better to make sure you don't do it again. We don't know if you did it, but we know you didn't prevent it. That's the way
Hmm.
I feel about it. Just don't fall for it again. Don't send another journalist in there unprepared. You know what I
Right.
mean? And that sucks that he had to be that life lesson. But until you can prove it in a court of law, that's what the world court is for. Maybe send your stuff there. Maybe be a part of that. I
And
don't know.
I would also make it very clear that, Mohammed bin Salman is someone that is going to be the person that will turn the taps off on you when it's politically convenient.
It's what he's doing.
And so this is the time where you have to push for your own energy independence, or
Yeah.
you have to push for new production in places that are closer.
Right.
Mexico.
But I think what I'm saying is what I started with is if Saudi Arabia is slowly turning to Moscow, Iran, China, India,
Saudi
you know,
Arabia is not turning to Iran. They will fucking go. they are fundamentally at odds with each other,
I
and I want to
understand
make sure,
because of their
that's
border.
very not even, they are at odds with each other even because of religion. They are two different sects
Okay,
of
and
the religion.
I I want you to know that there's discussions happening of softening of that relationship.
There are discussions because, a
I'm not
tense
saying it's
Middle
going to be
East.
this year, but in 20 years, I can see them being amicable and not hating, like not hating each other. And so if they're siding that way and you're left with just Israel, that's not going to be good for us. We need to go in energy independent if the people with oil are teaming up against democracy. And we're a democracy.
Well,
Either we have to turn to that or or we have to turn away from them.
and that's always going to be the discussion because,
Hmm.
a lot of these places are, I mean, Saudi Arabia is not democratic to begin with. Let's make that
No.
real fucking clear.
Right, they're all frenemies. I get that.
Saudi Arabia's democracy doesn't exist. It's a monarchy.
Right.
All those places out there are monarchies, and they're
Uh-huh.
traditional monarchies. And the
Yep.
fact that it's all royal family that gets appointed for everything. There's very little actual democracy that takes place in these places.
That's right.
So let's not kid ourselves on, the whole enemies of democracy thing. They don't give a shit about democracy. That's
No,
Let's
no.
be
Well,
real fucking honest about that.
they're in a united effort against our supremacy in a way that they haven't coalesced before.
But that's the ebb and flow of communities like that, and which
Yeah,
is where,
it's scary
I
as
think
fuck though.
everybody has to be real fucking clear about what energy independence is going to mean for them.
Uh-huh.
And I hate to say it, but there's a group of people out there that's, part of the West that needs to start really thinking about, nuclear as a part of that energy independence.
I agree.
And if they don't get real fucking serious about it, somebody like MBS is literally going to shut the taps off on us, and we're not going to be prepared for it.
Right, and laugh. He's going to decide who the president is. Well, I'll turn the oil off unless you put in Trump, you know? Because that's the way they think. Ransom is the way they think. Thank you for being here at Public Access America. Tune into our podcast every Sunday and Thursday and check out our live stream on YouTube at Public Access America. All right. I did tell him I'm the guy that edits the episodes, And
Hmm.
last week I had a mini fridge and I left it open and it was humming like the entire time. And you had static in your conversation initially, but when you weren't talking, it wasn't there. And it was this clusterfuck of stuff. And I had to listen to myself and I was like, you were a little too high. And I want to get that radio voice back. I don't know why. I like that. I'm gonna take a minute and check to see if Dan emailed or something, and
Might
go to the bathroom, and then we
as
can
well.
start. Cool. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, everybody. Nobody listening. Nobody ever watches the live stream. You know that?
Yeah, well,
I think you and I watch it later, or somebody else does.
hmm
All right. Twitter, Dan. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Sometimes people try and message, while I have the focus on, and then I don't get the messages because my focus is on.
That's fair.
Yeah, I guess. That's the amazing thing about it. So the awesome thing about being a Floridian now is I can apply for my medical marijuana card. So I'm kind of
Ooh,
excited about that.
that sounds fucking great.
Yeah, I know. I've never been the guy that could get my own weed. I've always been depending on other people. And I don't know if people understand disabled people, they can go one of two directions. Either they become wantingly more dependent or actively independent. And I am the actively independent guy. If I see something in my life that somebody else, I have to be dependent on somebody for, I will fight against that. And my friends don't seem to understand that I don't want to be dependent. But they're
That's
learning.
fair.
They're learning. Some people just it comes with the territory. Oh, you're blind, so you're gonna want to be dependent on me. No, I don't even want to know you. You know?
It's like, joke's on you. I don't
Right,
want
but
to.
that's that struggle of people like trying to be there for me, like a parachute, trying to protect me, but I don't want it, you know?
Yeah,
So I just think that's interesting. I have to have more patience with people, you know?
it's fuck. Is that hard?
It is hard. It is. So let me see. Let's see what we have in my note. I didn't have much on my brain because I've honestly been contemplating something really ridiculous. Let's see.
Ooh.
Showing. Well, I mean, I don't like Matt Gaetz and I don't like the other options, and I don't know anything about politics. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I want to run, but I don't know how to physically do it as an independent because my platform honestly would be do
Fuck you.
not
Fuck you.
don't
Fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck you.
no, do not donate to me. Keep your money. Don't donate to him. Don't give him your money. You need somebody that goes to, you said it. My platform is something you said, which is the government takes our money and then we don't have a representative fighting to get it back to us. Even if it's 75% of what we paid in taxes, Matt Gates is absent in getting anything
Hmm.
return to this district. And a lot of politicians are the same way. We all want the greater good, but it turns out Mitch McConnell fighting for his money in Kentucky gets more money than any other state because
Hmm.
he's fighting for his state. And I just kind of want to go to Congress and I want to hear them say, vote for this. There's this much in it for your district. Okay, you want to give my district $300 million? That's great because we paid more than that in taxes. We want it back. And I
Right.
think I want a politician that does that. That's what
Hmm.
they're for. They're not for yelling. They're not for going to California and yelling about a lady from Wyoming. That's what I don't want my guy doing. And when it
Right.
turns out that Matt Gaetz is the best option out of the six people, I think that there should be an alternative. And I don't know how to do that. And I don't. So I've spent 2 weeks working on that, thinking that you and Dan would just like talk for an hour and I
That's
wouldn't
fair.
and I wouldn't need a note. And I sent him a message saying I couldn't even imagine what you guys would talk about. So I didn't want to get in the way of that.
Yeah. I'm curious if he's just busy or what he's got going on. Let me see if.
I do appreciate him. He's never done that before, so
No. I mean, things are always busy. Like, I get it.
mhm. Yeah,
I'm always like, things are always a fucking mess for me. So
and I love not having
the fact that I ever get anything done is still sometimes just absolutely incredible to me.
So I was gonna dive into this topic. Let's see, where is it? It is I somebody said applied behavior analysis
Applied
is
behavior
is
analysis.
abuse. And I was like, applied behavior analysis sounds like a statement Jeffrey would make. And I looked into it and they use it in autism training and
Yep.
it's almost like gray rocking somebody that doesn't understand that you're gray rocking them. Like it's rewarding good behavior and not ignoring, but moving past bad behavior and not giving it the energy. And then I just I reached out on Twitter, put a journal request out looking for articles and references, and somebody said, because I said, is it useful or is it abuse? And somebody said it's abuse. Reached out to these people, and I did, and I was like, maybe I better make this like next week so I can gather more information. But I wondered if you,
I mean, I've heard about a little bit, and actually,
yeah,
it more comes from Debbie, and yes, from what I have read about it and what I've heard about it, it actually is abuse because it's more focused on trying to get someone to behave in a way that you expect them to,
right,
rather than understanding how their mind works and working with
right,
them to help them.
right,
It's this is what normal people need. You don't get to do this versus let's find out what your needs are and how do we help meet those needs. It's a very,
Right.
so I would actually agree it is abuse.
If
From what
so, if
I have seen and read on it, it's basically pray the gay away, but for autism.
that's what I was, so what I did was I went to a pro the ABA site, and that's what I was reading. And they put a like this veneer on it of no, we reward good behavior. We watch to see what causes the bad behavior so that we can catch it before it's a behavior. We watch the action, the reaction, and the consequences. And there's this veneer of no, it's just paying more attention and addressing things because we don't want them to be angry or hurt. And it's like, no, it's like gray rocking somebody. If and people without the mentality to understand what gray rocking is, that's somebody slowly trying to get you to lose interest in them, then you don't know what that is. And that can be taken a lot of different ways by a lot of different cognitive abilities. And but I couldn't find anything specific because I started making my vegan chili and lost interest in it.
Yeah, I don't know enough on it.
Yeah, me
But
neither.
what I have looked at, I'm not thrilled with.
Right.
It doesn't solve the problem because in the end, it's like I'm trying to get the behavior that I want, and I'm rewarding good behavior and giving consequences to bad behavior.
Right.
And for most neurotypical people, that works. You know, when you do something nice, we get thank yous and hugs. And
Right.
you do something bad, you might, well, you don't anymore, but you would have gotten smacked, at least when I was a kid.
Right.
But with people who are not neurotypical, you can't expect the same, you know, reward and punishment system. And you can gussy up however you want. That's what it is, though. It's
Mhm.
not. It's not about understanding the individual and what their needs are. It's
Right.
punishment reward, and that is
It's tit
that
for
is
tat.
a, it's and that is abuse in that realm because you're working with a person who either is struggling to or cannot communicate what's
Yeah.
happening to them, what their
Right.
experience is. And so that's really, that's really fucked up in a
And
lot of ways.
what I thought it should be is more of a, let's say, you know how they have Al-Anon, like Alcohol Anonymous, they teach you how to deal with an alcoholic. I thought this ABA was more for the person that interacts with an autistic person with issues. If somebody screams and stuff, you might want tools in your bag to address that, like on an individual level to see what works and doesn't work based on the person, not the system. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? Like if your kid reacts in a way where they start try and choke you, then you need a way to stop that before it happens, but you don't need to send them to somebody else to do that to them.
Right.
Right? Right.
So yeah, it's one of those things where,
Yeah.
uh, yeah,
Cool.
this
I
just,
like opening doors for others. Like, we don't know. Do you know? Like, and other people are going to be like, ABA, like, I want to know what is that? And I like that. And it's Autism Awareness Week, I believe. I saw briefly. So I wanted to address that.
well,
But I wanted,
my hope is that, maybe someone out there listening is,
yeah.
got the ability to communicate with us, what their
Hmm.
experience with that has been. And, that's something we can always chat about,
That's what I'm going to reach out to our friend from Philadelphia, Baritone Blurred, Jay. He was on a show and we talked, but he studied to be a social worker and he has an autistic daughter. So I think he's the
right.
perfect person to reach out to. Yeah, I like I said, I started making chili and then moved on with life. Like I
It's,
just couldn't do my note because I was like, all I have here is monkeypox. You know what I
yeah.
mean? I couldn't
And
form a note when it comes to Dan.
that's been another shit show of a fucking
Yeah,
disease that,
but again, I
is
didn't
not
even
being dealt with.
research that.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm surprised we talked about the things I spend the week looking at the news going, this is gross. Like this is
Yeah.
gross. And I want to talk about it, but then when Dan's coming on, I'm like, okay, set all that political stuff aside. So I didn't even really pay attention to most stuff, which is nice. It was really nice. I started binging Hotel Impossible, and like I hated it and then I love it. So
That's
I,
fair.
I watched 2 seasons of that because I really like people helping people and
Hmm.
just being super direct. Like I was watching Big Brother, and this girl Paloma, who left the show because of anxiety, which I respect, but she was like, I don't care about what you're saying. You don't mean anything. Am I being rude right now? And her question was honest. Am I being rude? It wasn't sarcasm. It was somebody that doesn't understand interactions that way, and I
Hmm.
feel that way where I just don't understand if I'm being rude to somebody. If you're about to jump off the bridge and I yell no, I don't consider that rude. You know what I mean? I consider it abrupt to get your attention. And
Right.
so I like that. And these guys on these shows, Hotel Impossible, Restaurant Impossible, where they're like, look, fix it, bar rescue. I love those guys because
Hmm.
they change people with their abrupt behavior. And I would hate for somebody to soft pedal information to me because they were worried about my reaction when always try to react neutrally to any information so that people feel free to give it to me because it's tough. People always want to get angry before they tell you what their problem is with you, and that's the scary thing, is that they spent so much time working up to something that they could have just said in a heartbeat.
Hmm.
Yeah. I don't know where I was going with that. People, you should talk to each other, and people, you shouldn't go all drama queen or Jerry Springer when you get information that isn't life altering that way?
Oh God.
We met.
Anymore, I feel like that's what most communication looks like anymore, at least on social
Uh-huh.
media, is it looks like an episode of Jerry Springer. It's just screaming,
Right.
yelling, chairs being thrown across the room, someone running off stage crying. It's like
Mm-hmm.
social media is just Jerry Springer, but with a lot more typing.
Right. Well, good people, friends, they want to lie to you to spare your feelings. They don't want to be the one to tell you, right? Like everybody said, nobody wanted to be in the last one in the room with Trump telling him he was wrong. Nobody wants to give bad news to somebody, but it's up to us to like be the sponge that absorbs it instead of like rubber that pushes it back. Oh yeah, you know what I mean? Like, hey, you left the toilet seat up. Oh yeah, you don't have to go there for that, right? So I don't know. We need to communicate better. I like that.
Absolutely.
Has anything been on your top of mind?
Oh, let's see. I mean, for me, the biggest thing, I've had, a lot of work on top of mine, and of course, my shoulder going or my arm going numb has been a big one.
Right.
But, just looking at, I think, inflation hit the highest that it's ever been, been in 40 years in this country.
Yeah. Right.
And like, it's not slowing down. It makes me glad that, some of the stuff that we were able to do, we did, when rates were super low.
Mm-hmm.
But this is now starting to impact, it's starting to potentially impact how, I'm going to do things moving forward.
Me
And that's
too.
really unfortunate because, especially as someone who's going to have student loans coming back, into, repayment. It's
Mm-hmm.
like all of the money that I have spent supporting the community is going to change very quickly, and I'm not going to be doing the things that I was doing, you know.
Right.
And so I do have a lot of concerns about what, more rate increases are going to do, what, repayment situations are going to do. I honestly think that what's going to happen, like part of the reason we've seen inflation kick up the way that we have is you have a bunch of people who have finally been able to take the money that they have been spending on student loans and actually spend them in the community. So they're doing things that they haven't, that people want, my age group to do that we haven't been able to do. But the moment that repayment comes back in, you're going to see a market, change in how money gets spent. Like, for example, I'm not going to be, having lunch out. I'm going to be bringing lunch to work. I'm not going to be going out for dinners or ordering in. I'm going to be, making my own stuff. Um, or, finding, different meal kit boxes that, I can make at home really quickly. And, luckily I found one that I actually really like so far. But the biggest thing about inflation is going to be that all of the places that I have been throwing financial support behind are going to suffer because I'm not going to be eating. I'm not going to be eating there. I'm not going to be shopping there. I'm not going to be doing a whole lot. And that's unfortunately, like, when you look at the state of the economy, I honestly think, there's a reason why there's a lot of people out there predicting a big recession that's, going to start later on in the year and last through 2024. And that's because money is going to become very tight. Mitch McConnell said people aren't working because they're flush with cash.
Hmm.
Well, you might, if people aren't working, but they're somehow still supporting the local economy, something's up there. But if they can't support the local economy anymore and, they're not working, well, that's really going to be a fucking shit show.
Agreed. But debt is up. People are using credit more, and they're going to be using credit less. They're not they're not cash flush.
Hmm.
They spent the pandemic getting their credit better. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And now they're using it. So people don't have money. So if you're trying to make an economy where people have less money to reduce inflation, that's going to cause a recession because nobody has the backup supplies to manage that recession bounce, you know?
And for me, like, what that's been, I think, one of the glorious things about this time period is I finally got my credit card debt under control and
A
it's
lot of people
gone.
did. And there's apps coming out, Truebill, Tally, where you can do Credit Karma, where you can do all this stuff just on your phone. You know,
Yeah.
people want to get out of debt. The problem is the cottage industry of debt is suffering because of that, you know?
Hmm. And that's, and for me, that's like I got out of debt while also being able to support my community. And I think
Hmm.
that right there is, what I was always told the American dream was. Now, if I could get out of my student loan debt on top of that, while
Hell
also
yeah.
supporting the community, that would be also fantastic.
Can you imagine the inflation they would calculate just from nobody having to pay student loans? Which they haven't. I mean, there's been a moratorium, right?
For over 2.5 years.
Right. So, I mean, it would cause a recession to make people start paying that because, like I said, they're
Absolutely.
living on credit, not cash.
Absolutely. And I think, I think that's going to be there's going to be a real big hit when they jump the interest rates again and then move into repayment at the same time. Because the
Exactly.
people who are living on credit, is that life is going to become more expensive now,
Uh-huh.
on top of the fact that their student loan rates, depending on what the interest rates are on them, are also going up at that time too.
Hmm.
So, for me, it's gonna get expensive, and I'm not gonna be able to do the things that I have done, and that's perfectly fine. I did what I did, part because it also satisfied me, but in another part because, there are places that I want to see stay in business, and
Yeah.
this is about to get very rough on them, because it's not going to affect the huge stores the same way that it's going to affect the small ones.
No, it isn't. And that's kind of the issue, isn't it? These prices are raised because they can get away with it, not because it's a necessity. There's still profits being made, and these people that produce goods and people that sell goods really don't care what the optics to Joe Biden look like. You know what I mean?
No,
They're not
no.
sitting there going, "We should decrease our profits so Joe Biden looks better." No, that's not what they're doing. The oil companies are like, yeah, we can lower prices a little bit. And the gas stations are like, yeah, but we don't want to, you know? So
Well,
they're- they
and
want the
then
profits. They just want the profits.
everybody wants the profits. There's
Hmm.
no question about that. And I don't fault people for wanting to be profitable. Fault them for how profitable they choose to be.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not saying that you need to skirt by, but when, you're complaining about X, Y, and Z, but then you're handing out millions upon, hundreds of millions of dollars in bonuses. I really don't give a shit what you're saying. Like that
Right.
doesn't make any fucking sense to me. Or, if you're getting, billions of dollars back in tax refunds, I don't really give a shit.
Right.
Like I'm sorry, I don't get that kind of tax refund. I'm constantly getting fucked over for taxes,
Hmm.
and that really sucks because that hurts a lot.
What I have a problem with it, the guy that can sell insulin for $9,000 a vial, because the free market would say somebody's going to come along and compete with that.
Hmm.
But somehow he managed to buy the rights to insulin. I don't think that should have been able to happen. What happened to competition? There's no way in a free market capitalist society somebody could corner the market on something so widely needed. You
Well,
know what I mean?
and I think that's been one of the biggest problems is that, most of the rights issues, it used to be that, you had rights for 10 years, and
Right,
then
right, right,
people could either license off of you or develop the same thing.
right.
And that was perfectly acceptable.
But
But
price was
now it's
based on that. Price of a medication was based on that 10-year period. How much did it cost to R&D it? How much
exactly.
did it, and then how much so we get our profit back
And
before
then
we, yeah,
companies made their money off of licensing generics because they didn't have to produce that and
right,
recapture the products. Now they could hand over that licensing cost to multiple different places and make, a passive income off of that while they
right,
R&D their next products.
right.
So it's one of those, it's one of those things where, unfortunately things have moved towards we're in a wonky way, moved back towards monopolies. And
Right.
that's, where we're at. Like, I don't know if you've seen anything about like the Mark Cuban drug company.
I I
The
I've
or
heard he was working on it
it's live.
because
And
he
base
didn't like Amazon getting into it.
he didn't like Amazon getting into it,
Okay,
and
that's the
he,
story I'm thinking of
that's
then.
yeah, he didn't like Amazon getting into it, and on top of that, yeah, it's the Mark Cuban Cost Plus Drugs Company, and it's really interesting. Like, I was looking, and I could get, one of the medications that I get that I'm paying, uh, $10 a month for. I could get for, I want to say, $6 for a 90-day supply.
I
So
like it.
$24 savings right there over the course of a 3-month period. And they're working on adding that, adding to their library of drugs that they can
See,
sell.
isn't that perfect? Somebody didn't like the system, so the government didn't have to create and
Mhm.
expand. There was a competition that came out, and now there's going to be 40 versions of something that we have to choose from because the
And
ACA doesn't work for everybody. Maybe Cuban Plus does, you know?
and that's the thing is like, for example, so like they don't work with insurance at all. And they're clear. They show you what the cost of manufacturing is, and that there is a 15% markup on all of their drugs. And so they literally show you, it's like, here's what it costs to make, here's the markup, here's the shipping, this is what you're paying.
That's
You know,
perfect.
it's entirely transparent. And so now it's like, oh, okay, so this, I mean, like anything else, you have to rely that they're being honest on what the production cost is, but a lot of these are
Sure.
generics and they're cheap to produce,
And you also have to understand that people that know production know how much that takes to make. So
Exactly.
you can make it transparent, but you're also assuming that other people aren't going to call you on it if you're lying.
Right. And so, I've even sat down and I'm looking at this going, should I be sending my prescriptions in to this place? Because, if I can get my 90-day script, pay with my FSA, and instead of paying, for 3 scripts, paying $30 a month,
Mm-hmm.
aka, $90 over a 3-month period, but
Right,
instead now I'm paying, you know, 20 to $30. Great. That's
right.
fantastic. I would absolutely love to save my FSA money to use on other things.
Totally.
Or, yeah,
I just don't like the thing where, well, I'm going to use Medicare for this, but then I have my Aetna supplemental. It's going to pay for that. And now I got my Good RX because, it doesn't cover that. And now I got to go over to Cubanar or Amazon. Like, what I don't want to end up doing is going to 40 places just to save $5, you
I
know?
mean, and I think that's one of the tough parts is that
Oh, agreed.
I think a place like,
In
Mark
the Old
Cuban's
West,
gig,
you have to.
I think in Mark Cuban's case, he wants to be the place that's a one-stop shop
Hmm.
where, he's literally going to save people, hundreds if not thousands of dollars on medication
That's great.
and still make a profit on it, knowing that, that profit isn't going towards R&D. It's literally going towards purchasing licensing for generics so that way he can expand the library.
See, I like that. I think what happens is the pharmaceutical industry gets together and they start writing policies that protect them. I think social media industry gets together and they start lobbying for things that protect them. The gun industry gets together and they offer legislation that protects them. And in a way, we're kind of left out of the process, and the corporations end up making the laws that regulate themselves. And
Hmm.
it's the politicians that are saying, okay, yeah, I'll pass your law for 40 grand. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
That's an
Yeah.
issue.
And with in this case, you've got somebody, who number one has fuck you money. Number two,
Mhm.
kind of has a fuck you mentality towards the system to begin with.
Right.
Number three has literally figured out a way to purchase licensing, make the markup so that way this thing is self-sustaining.
Right.
He understands how to do this.
And
And
yeah.
so literally, like, as long as people start looking towards this and using it, is there always a chance that it could become a monopoly? I don't think so. And the reason why is because the way that his system is going to work is going to make other systems try to be more competitive.
Right.
It's
Other
going to make
people are going
it's
to
going to
want a
make
piece of that.
Walmart's, Amazon's, CVS's
Hmm.
try to actually be more competitive about how they're
Right.
selling their generics. And that's the other thing too is like by doing this, because all of my medications are generics. There have been very few times in my life where I've actually been on the name brand medication.
Yeah.
And I think, for the most part, hey, great, they work, they're effective. I haven't had any issues with them, and I think for very few people, it really does matter if whether or not they're on the generic or the name brand.
Right.
But at the same time, too, there also runs the opportunity for some of these places to license their medications solely to a place where they know that number one, they're going to get a good licensing fee, and number two, they'll know that they're going to be able to move enough quantities of this. So it's one of those things where there is some hope that it is actually going to affect the
Right.
consumer drug price market, but at the same time too, it's also something that I'm going to watch with caution. I do
Well,
want to be able to save a ton of money on my prescription meds.
mhm.
And do I like the idea of necessarily supporting another billionaire's, you know, company? Not necessarily, but when I look at who I've been supporting, I
Exactly.
mean,
That's what I
so
wanted to say is when you see Elon Musk saying, "Well, I would reduce the price of my car if you could get inflation under control." Well, yeah, you could make a little less profits to get inflation under control. Like raising the price of your goods is the definition of inflation. So you're not really helping people. So the grayscale of douchebag between Mark Cuban being a nicer version of a billionaire douchebag or Elon Musk, who I just don't like. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
oh, this whole Twitter thing, it made me want to go buy Twitter, but I didn't want to fall into the game. But I really think Twitter users should buy up all the Twitter stocks so that Elon Musk can't. And then I hope Twitter wins and gets their $45 billion from him for backing out of the deal. And then I hope we can all just enjoy Twitter without an Elon Musk
Oh,
present.
that Twitter deal. Okay, so here's how this works.
Mm.
Either Twitter gets $1 billion essentially for pain and suffering in dealing with Elon Musk and they
Yeah,
stay
yeah, yeah.
themselves, or what the clause is that they force the sale and he has to buy it.
Right, which
That's
would be devastating to Twitter because he's going to run that shit into the ground because he hates them, right?
mm, I mean, it's if you think Twitter's the Wild West right now, it's literally going to be the Wild West, but now here's cocaine or crocodile. I don't know. It's going to be
It'll
fucking
turn
weird.
into Truth Central because most rational people are going to leave. Twitter's pretty small. Like they have less than 1,000 employees. I looked on the thing, and they don't have a lot of money. They don't have a lot of resources, but they have a lot of notable people, politicians and such on there, so people
Hmm.
gravitate toward there. But when it comes to like Facebook or Twitter, there's no competition there. No, like Twitter is
Yeah.
the feed on Facebook without the marketplace and the dating sites and the geolocating and Messenger and all that stuff. You know what I mean? Twitter's kind of tiny.
Twitter is small, but it's a shit show. It's a weird shit show.
Agreed. I just don't want Elon Musk to buy it because it's the one thing I'm on. Because I can literally block the articles so I don't have to see that stuff. I can actually curate my stuff and not see what I don't want to see. But I also see stuff that I disagree with. So it's weird.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know. I don't know why I don't like Facebook. I don't have a problem with with Facebook and people in America using it. What I have a problem with is they in like Sri Lanka, right? Like where that's the only form of communication and then Facebook decides what it's going to show the people of Sri Lanka or when to turn it off in South Vietnam because they don't like what a candidate said. I don't like their destabilizing efforts around the globe, but I think Americans with the options available on Facebook aren't as stuck.
so in that case, here's what I will say. These mega tech corporations have a price to pay if they want to operate in markets that they're in. So, for
Uh-huh.
example, Google has to filter out results for certain things in
Yeah,
China.
of course.
They have to do that in Vietnam. They have to do that in Sri Lanka.
Hmm.
Otherwise, what happens is the government that runs the central, that allows the central technology to come through, essentially bars access. They just turn off the IP ports that allow communication to Facebook servers.
I know that, and that's fine. But if there's consisting requirements and alleyways, and then somebody just comes up and says, "No, that was approved, but we don't like it in this case." I have a problem with that. Yeah, I think
But
a tech
that's and
company
that's
should stand up and say, "No, this is part of our contract. You're defaulting on the contract. We have no reason to not do it." And then, yeah, you might turn off the servers on Facebook, but they have integrity, you know?
well, the
And
integrity is
That happened in Russia. We'll lock up all your Facebook employees that are in Russia if you don't remove this stuff. And I think Facebook should have had balls and said, that's an aberration from our existing agreement. So no. And have your integrity. Don't bow to some dictator's whim. Stick to the
Mhm.
contract. That's the way I feel.
I don't disagree with you on that, but at the same time, if your segment's livelihood depends on access to a market, what are you going to do? Or in the case of like Russia, where they literally just reverse engineer your sites and then make their own
VK?
because
Yeah.
because they claim domain over your stuff.
Hmm. Fine.
So
But you have
that's
integrity and you still have hundreds of billions of dollars. You didn't lose $100 billion by saying no. You lost the potential for $45 billion from Russia. And yeah, potential, that's lost. That sucks. But your
mhm.
integrity, that's what's going to bring people back. I'm not going to go back to Facebook if they're still doing this stuff around the world.
They're
You
always
know,
going to be doing this stuff around the
then
world.
I'm never going to go back.
Google is always going to be doing this stuff around the world. Apple is always going to be doing this stuff around the world. Like that's the thing
Agreed.
about these large companies is that there is a certain cutoff point where they're willing to deal with bullshit for the sake of access to the market. And
Agreed.
every company is always going to default to a certain standpoint. Google is never going to have, the integrity to show all the results because
That's a
the answer
shame.
is because the answer is that if Google wants to be in China, They can't show Tiananmen Square. They
But what I
cannot
that
show.
that's
They
fine.
can't show Hong Kong
If you want to go in, if you want to
democratic
go into
protests.
China and say we'd like to be in your country, and China says these are the requirements, and those requirements are restrictions, that's fine. But then if the Chinese department says, hey, we now want you to stop showing COVID protests, and you say that wasn't part of our requirements, that needs negotiation like our original contract did. No, we want our integrity, and you get kicked out, that's different. You know what I mean?
But
Going
that's the thing
into a
is that
market and
that
agreeing, yeah.
that but that but that's the reality of contracts is that
Okay.
things change as they come up. And working contract law myself, you either have to A, negotiate, or B, you have to accept a larger entity's terms if you want to continue.
That's right. That's the
and
choice. That's the
and
choice.
and so if you consistently go with, hey, we're going to make, this is that scope creep talk, and
Mm-hmm.
you can make all of the determinations you want, but the reality is that at some point every single one of us is going to agree to do something that we would not have necessarily agreed to begin with, and that there is a true cost there.
But
All of us
yeah,
have made that all of us have made that choice, either on small levels or on large levels, like these
of
corporations.
course.
And the problem is that when you're dealing with governments who don't have the same value of free speech as we do, you are never going to be satisfied with how they determine what speech is acceptable. For us, and for an American value system, we value the ability to say what we want, when we want, how we
That's
want.
right.
But in China, that is never going to be the case, and
That's fine.
you are always going to be at the will of the government saying this is now unacceptable, and your answer has to be okay.
That's fine. But you know, I'm not going to use a product that does that.
And in which case, you're not going to be using a lot of big company products.
I
You're not
agree.
going to be using Apple. You're not going to be using Google. You're not going to be using
I
Facebook. You're
agree.
not going
But
to be
I think
using
I
Meta,
remember
I
what I
should say.
wanted to say. Google acting on the whims of people like that is a permission is the top of the permission structure that allows things like TikTok to agree with 202, you know?
Hmm.
And it's Instagram. Everyone can fall in line if you're developing an app saying, well, Google compromised their morals, so I can too for profit. I just wish people valued integrity more. Like, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. But if somebody does
Everybody,
something, if somebody kills a dissident and it's like you don't like it, don't operate there. And I don't like people supporting things that do that. You know, that have a
everybody
lower moral
compromises.
compass.
Well, and that's the difference is that what we determine as moral compass is determined differently. Moral compass is a very subjective thing, and
Yeah, I guess so.
we have a very unique view on moral compass.
Mm.
Our moral compass is more individualistic. It's more about the freedom of speech and expression.
Oh, right. And that's why
Whereas,
I'm not protesting Meta. I'm not protesting Meta every day
right.
because it's an individual moral decision by me. And
Hmm.
like, I understand other people that are on Facebook. You have other choice, like you have other choices. You have a mind that can seek out other information. And so to you, it's not a cage. To you, it's just one perspective. But to other people that don't feel like they have other
Hmm.
places to look, they're kind of trapped. My friend told me, "Well, yeah, I get most of my news from Facebook." And I was like, "And isn't that sad that
Yep.
you're that lazy?" And that's what scares me because even if it's reasonable news, Facebook can suddenly decide that, well, the RNC paid us more than the DCC, so we're going to lean more toward. I remember Facebook saying, hey, we just partnered up with Fox News, and my feed was every other thing was Fox News rhetoric. And
Hmm.
I complained and I complained and it stopped. And because I was deleting and blocking and it was
Hmm.
nuts, you know what I mean? And so people complained and had an effect that way. And I,
Hmm.
but there's people that think Facebook is the end all be all, and Facebook can then manipulate
Hmm.
what they choose to do based on profits and not morals. And there's not a lot of people that are like you or me or Dan that see other options, you know?
Well, and that's the problem is that,
Hmm.
you've come up to a generation that wants to be told what to think, what
Yeah,
there is.
right.
And like I said, the reality is that when it comes to large companies, the large company is rarely based on integrity. Large companies didn't get where they are because they were
That's
entirely,
true. They didn't.
they didn't get to
Right,
where they are because they operated solely on integrity. They
right.
operated because they were able to be profitable and within the margins of integrity. And
Yeah.
so that's the real difference is that, for example, Google's big slogan used to be do no evil. That disappeared. So it's
Right.
the
Because what
question,
is evil? To who?
what is evil to who? Exactly. When you deal with subjectives like integrity, integrity has different meanings to different people. Integrity
Yeah.
means different things to different people. And subjectively, what integrity means to us is going to mean something entirely different to an entirely different culture.
Well, a
You know,
chairman of the board, integrity is making it money for the people that depend on that money for their survival.
and also, depending on the board, not having the feds crawl up their ass with a fine-tooth comb. So
Of
they're going to
course.
make just the right decision that is just within the realms of acceptable tolerances to not get fucking
That's
searched.
true, because if you give an inch, they'll take a mile. So
Mhm.
if you tell the government, yeah, we'll be moral about this, the government's going to be like, yeah, but now legally,
No, no. The difference is that they're going to be legal about it, but whether or not it's moral is a whole different decision.
that is
You can
kind of
do
the
a lot.
problem.
You can do a lot of things legally that most of us would go, Jesus, do you have any morals whatsoever?
I know, and more by the Republican day.
So you're always going to run into that issue when it comes to large companies.
Yeah.
There is an integrity that exists, but there are margins, and
Hmm.
sometimes they have high integrity on certain things, and sometimes they don't. The difference is that I don't expect them to go on the high end of integrity when I'm using their products and services. For
Yeah.
fuck's sake, if we wanted to believe that Apple was going to be the most high integrity company, they wouldn't have had fucking factories where kids were putting together phone parts for them. And
Yeah.
that's just the way that it is. All of these major companies do things that are within the realm of legal that most of us would consider immoral, and
Yeah.
that is something that you have to be comfortable with. You either have to tell people to change their laws or people have to change their behaviors,
Uh-huh.
because what are you going to complain about? If somebody is doing something that is considered legal within their country, who are you to say that it's not?
Agree.
I mean, we have
Agree.
a very unique perspective as Americans on what we think is legal and illegal. But a lot of that shit does not hold up the moment you leave our borders. There are things
Right.
that are very, very different, whether you end up in Canada, whether you end up in Mexico, whether you end up in Denmark or Russia.
Sure. I
You
can't
know,
force my morals on you any more than America can force its morals on Russia.
exactly. And
Exactly.
and so that's why I say integrity is a bitch to make decisions off of, because
Mhm.
integrity has no legal definition.
And there will always
And
be
there
people that are less so than you, you know?
there's going to be people that are going to be less so, there's people that are going to be more so.
Oh,
And the
here's what I
difference.
wanted to say. We can't change what they say and do, but we can change what we say and do, right?
Mhm.
I was thinking about that with Trump. Like, I don't have to get Trump to change. I have to get people to start seeing him for what he is. I need people to think differently. And that's why we've been doing this podcast the way we have, is because we can't stop Republicans and Democrats from being who they are, but we can tell the rest of the people paying attention
Mhm.
they're putting a sugar coat on their shit too, you
Oh,
know?
absolutely. Absolutely. And especially when you're being told that you have to check all the boxes down one of the columns.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
It's like, no, some things the Republicans say make sense. A lot of it doesn't. Some things the
Mm-hmm.
Democrats say make sense. A lot of it
Right.
doesn't. And the reality is that, I'm never going to check a box all the way down simply for checking a box all the way down,
Right. But
because that
there's
doesn't that has not worked.
I can tell you one thing that motivated me about registering the vote, and that was Republicans' view on abortion because there's one thing as a man that will make me react like a pit bull, and that's if you make a woman in my life cry. And Republicans made women cry, and that hurt me. And I have white knight syndrome, and now I want to save all women because that's who I am. So, and I'm just a fringe white guy that was pretty independent and non-active. And now I'm kind of active. And that I wonder if I've always thought I was below average in life and that other what I do other people were already doing. And so I can imagine there's a lot of people. I invited Val Demings on the show because she's like, the last Senate election was decided by 10,000 votes. And I was like, hey, I'm in the panhandle. There's 10,000 votes here.
Hmm.
No, no response. And I think that's fascinating that politicians are like, please give me your vote money. Give me your vote money. Give me your vote. We want to know what you think. Hey, come and talk to us. We'll tell you what we think. Nah, no. It just fascinates me.
They will come and talk to you as long as as long as there's a price that's going into their campaign coffer. That's it.
That's what I've noticed is people want me to fundraise. I've asked them for interviews or conversations and they've come back with donation sites. And I what I know is even if I donate, it's not going to be enough. And even if I donate, they're not going to see the individualized donation. So it doesn't work as a payoff for me. And I'm not going to pay somebody to come on the show because then the view is skewed, you know?
Absolutely. And that's and it's real unfortunate because
Mm-hmm.
you sit down and say somebody's vote matters and having conversation with real people matters.
Right.
But if your I'll come have a conversation with you is dependent on you getting money,
Right.
then that's not a conversation. That's a campaign. And you're not I don't have the expectation that everybody's going to have the answers. I
Mm-mm.
have an expectation that people are going to have a conversation and say, you know
Right.
what? Let's take a look at this. Let's see what we can find out. Let's see what we can answer. And
Right.
and other than that, what is happening is that no, let's have a conversation. Here's my donation site. My people will get in touch with your people for the right amount of money.
Oh, that's what I get. I get that. Well, here's the email. Just send
Yep.
it there. And if I don't give them money, I don't get a response. And I have invited, look, I'm not going to be mean to Marco Rubio. I don't agree with him on a lot of things, but I also realized that at one point in time, he was part of the progressive version of Republicans with Jeb Bush in Florida.
Hmm.
So what I don't like is why did you fall away from that? I Matt Gaetz voted to get funding for soldiers that were affected by burn pits. I
Hmm.
respect that. Why can't you be more that, Matt Gaetz? So I invited these people, but I've also invited AOC, Beto O'Rourke, Ilhan Omar, Sheldon Whitehouse. I've also invited Mitch McConnell. I've also invited smaller like Dick Durbin. You know what I mean? I've invited these people. We're up to like 125 invitations. Deja responded. And look
Yeah.
what we got from that. That is still one of our most popular episodes. Why? Because people want to know about her, because they're tired of the cookie cutter old man Joe Biden cat
Hmm.
dog TV model of politician. But
Yep.
they want AOC, but they don't want somebody radical all over the place. And I don't know if she's radical. I think she has a certain view that needs to be challenged. We can't
You know,
do that with this one-sidism.
and that's the thing is like anybody like Deja, of course somebody's going to think somebody like Deja is radical. But when you sit down and you have a conversation with Deja,
Right.
there's nothing radical about, a
Uh-uh.
person's experience and wanting to make sure others that have had that experience
Right.
are protected and validated and get to live the life that they have.
Right.
So, getting to live the life that you have is not a radical idea. It's radical if you don't think they should.
That's the point. People have a problem with like sex work, but they don't want to give sex workers legitimacy once they move on from that. There was
Hmm.
where was that? Somebody couldn't do something. They couldn't run for office. They were saying because she was OnlyFans girl. I can't remember what that was. And they were like, fuck no. Like the experience somebody has to get from where they were to get to where they are is amazing. That's the journey. I'm not going to criticize somebody for one moment in their life. I'm going to criticize them based on what they learned from that, you know?
Right. And unfortunately most people have not learned anything about people who do sex work.
Right.
You know, you think about it, going to a strip club, strippers, that's sex work.
Of course.
You know, whether or not certain people want to admit that, they'll go in there and they'll throw money up on the stage, but I mean, let's be real honest. It's sex work. So
Sex work.
why, why are you okay with it in that realm?
And
If you sit down and say sex,
I consider a Victoria's Secret model sex work. You know what I mean? In a way.
in a way.
So, and like you were saying about integrity, I have different views of what pornography is. You know what I mean?
Mhm. So, everybody, and you find that it's like everybody has a threshold, and that threshold is
Yeah.
absolutely human trafficking. And
Right.
so how do we make sure that the threshold to get there actually is a lot harder to get there? And that's where, legalizing sex work is what makes,
Yeah.
that black market of human trafficking a lot more difficult in this country.
And informing people about the signs of abuse and sex work, and
Right.
giving people that come from sex work opportunities beyond social worker for that. Like
Hmm.
Deja fights for sex workers, but also for transgender people, but also for healthcare for everyone. And so
Hmm.
she isn't stuck in one position. Her values help the society that she wants to represent. She's not looking to be president. Deja wants to represent a community in need, her community in need.
Right. And that's fantastic,
Hmm.
because her community needs that support, it needs that recognition,
Yeah.
and it needs that representation. And everybody's communities, whether you go from the conservative Christian to the very liberal sex work positive
Uh-huh.
LGBTQ plus, there's an entire spectrum of people who need representation. But the difference for me in a lot of cases is that it's always based on making sure that somebody else doesn't have the right to do what it is that they want to do. And I don't support that. Period. End of story.
Right.
To me, it's like, look, I give, to me, it's give and give. The football coach should be allowed to pray on the 50-yard line, just like the sex worker should be allowed to own a legitimate business that, they do what they do.
No
To me,
harming, no foul.
exactly. There is no harm. There is no victim.
That's right.
And if there's no victim, there's no problem.
Mm, I love
And
that.
just because you don't like something doesn't make you a victim. I'm sorry your
Right.
feelings got hurt. You're not a victim.
I thought Dance Moms was disgusting, so I turned it off. I watched something else. It still exists. You don't hear me going, that's gross to dress little girls up in the smallest outfits possible and make them bend in ways that turn creepy men out. I think that's gross that you would encourage
Hmm.
that, you know? Like little girl can dance in sweatpants too, you know what I mean? Like, but that's not my genre. I like dog shows. I watch dog shows. I don't tell people they have to go watch dog shows, you know?
Hmm.
Well, it's me. Fuck. Who was it? The Bloodhounds were just beautiful. But then I think it was the French Bulldog won it all, and I don't like little
Like,
toy dogs.
god damn it, fucking little shit.
My dream is to have a coonhound. I love coonhounds for some reason. Their colors, their temper, their bark, they just sound awesome to me, you know?
I've really enjoyed having Billy. Billy has been probably, I think she's been my favorite dog so far. She is an absolute love. She has energy. She's full of kisses. She has the protect. She's been a great all around dog to
I
have.
like that. I
And
always think dogs are the ones that are paying it forward. Like the cats around here, they're like, "Oh, hi, I want to talk to you now." And I'm like, "Yeah, but right now I'm in the middle of something. I'm on the toilet." No, now. Or they'll ignore me. But dogs are always like, "Hey, I'm gonna want something from you later, so I'm gonna give you a little lick right now and go lay down." You know?
right, it was like, Billy was, all over the place, running around being goofy right when we started things, and now she's curled up on the couch and just sleeping away, waiting for me to get done, so that way there'll be kisses and playtime and all that other fun stuff.
Aw. What do you do for Billy's mental health, for Billy's well-being? Let's end on
Um,
that.
So for Billy's well-being, I mean, number one, start with good food. Like it's like I get it, some of that cheap shit is real. I mean, it really is like you want to get that stuff because, the cost
It's
of it.
cheap.
But honestly, like, you know, when they're constantly, having gas issues, if they're constantly like, having to poop, if they're
Yeah.
constantly, drinking water to offset what they've eaten, they're constantly, they don't get me wrong, like there are dogs out there that are just fucking food centric, and Billy's one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime you have a snack, she wants it too. It's, fuck.
Right.
But you'll find that, like she gets into stuff because she can, not because she doesn't, not because she's acting like she is not,
A
like
good
she's
dog,
getting,
right.
well, not even that. Not like she's, nutritionally, stunted. She needs, she's not trying to get into stuff to
Ah, I
supplement,
gotcha. Right.
what she isn't getting. She just, when she is getting into stuff, she's just being naughty.
That's
But,
cool.
she's healthy. She's got a good look. We get out, get her running around playing here in the house or running around outside, playing ball.
What the? Dan's here.
Oh, Dan finally showed up.
All right. Hello. Oh, poor Jeffrey. I don't know what I missed in that email. Emails are not my first form of communication.
That's fair. That's
Yeah.
fair.
Hi, Dan.
Hello, hello. Good
Hello,
to be back.
hello.
Been way too long.
Nice. I'm so happy you're here.
Yeah.
We recorded.
Oh wait, it's already done.
Yeah, kinda.
Oh
Yeah, we
man,
were
I
just
said,
wrapping up.
damn. I said, it's 2 p.m. Eastern okay? And you said, okay, no, mind.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was 12. I thought you wrote 12. I'm bad at email. I'm sorry. I was just
Oh,
saying
no
before you
worries.
got in. But I love
Oops.
you. Jeffrey asked like I hope he's okay and I was like, yeah, there's something came up because Dan's never not been here.
Uh,
And I'm happy to keep talking, but I can't promise you Jeffrey.
Like
But I'm glad you're here. I'll
I can
keep going.
I can do a little bit longer.
Cool.
But like give me a second and I'll be back.
no
That's not a
worries.
problem. Hey,
I'm so sorry because I think we messed up because I feel like I remember we've done 1 p.m. in the past
r-
and
um
Eastern,
y-
and I asked what time do we
right.
start? Is 2 p.m. Eastern acceptable? So
Gotcha.
yeah,
I
my
probably just
bad.
I saw one because I wanted to see a one. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I hear you.
Like there's blind things, but then there's guy things of just being lazy. So
That's true. That's fair. I feel bad though. I would always, if I couldn't make it, I would always give you guys a good reason because
oh, I'm sure of
I
it.
value your time. Like if you guys are gonna create something cool, I want to support it. So I
Well,
don't
I
want to flake on you
appreciate
guys.
that. You're fine. I have no problem with that. More content is better than less content, and having Dan is better than not having Dan, you know?
Yeah, no worries.
I love that. So you've been off for a month. What have you been doing for your mental
So
health?
in the past 5 weeks, well, Marissa, my wife, and I went to um, England, Scotland, and Iceland for a 5 week
You're
excursion.
kidding me.
It was fantastic. It was like a combination of stuff. So, seeing my family over there because I have family in England. My mom was born there. And then seeing them for a few days, and then just doing some touristy stuff in London, and then in Edinburgh and Glasgow. But my
Wow.
brother lives in Inverness, as in like Loch Ness. So I went up there to visit him in the Scottish Highlands for a few days with my wife, of course. We came
Wow.
down, explored Edinburgh, Glasgow, and then flew over to Iceland and did 12 days where we rented a car and we saw the entire country. Like we drove more than 1,200 miles all over the country in like 12 days. And that doesn't include, we had a 12-hour off-roading tour that we went right into the middle of the country and snowshoed on a volcano on June 23rd. It was great.
Wow.
So
That's
it
how
was
you know love is
snowing.
gonna last when you can survive 12 hours and 1,200 miles in a car with your significant other and not dump them at the side of the road. Like, I'm surprised she
Exactly.
just didn't kick you.
No, she was super excited. Like we it was we planned it together and she was actually the person in charge of the itinerary. So I sort of we carved out the time, and she was the one who took the lead on what we wanted to do in there. So it was really great. It was wonderful. It was really nice to get away and kind of have a nice mental reset. So
I
yeah,
love that.
that's kind of what I've been up to. So how about
Well,
you guys?
congratulations, Marissa. She got a really good guy. You know what I mean? I'm
Yeah.
really happy. And now I can acknowledge her. I'm sorry because I only bring up what people bring up.
Of
I
course,
don't
yeah.
expose other people's private lives. So I did say that you were on honeymoon, I think, but I never said with who.
Oh yeah, no worries. Yeah, my wife's name is Marissa.
Okay.
She's really great. She's a
She's an amazing sleep study expert, right?
yeah, she's a clinical psychologist whose research
Wow.
experience is focused on sleep, but it's not the only thing that she does. But
Okay.
she's got a lot to offer, which is really great. And it's nice to she gives people therapy, and then I come home and I give her therapy, and it's a wonderful cycle. So,
Isn't that
uh,
beautiful?
yeah,
Just being there for somebody sometimes is the reward we need, you know?
yeah, absolutely, yeah. That's why I like
Yeah.
coming on and supporting the show because y'all are great, and I want to support it. So,
Like I wrote, I told Jeffrey, I was like, I can't even imagine where the conversation is going to go between Jeffrey. Like I would never try and script that. Why put two Ferraris in the seat of a Toyota and ask him to get there? You know what I mean?
absolutely.
I Yeah, I wanted to ask you what's top of mind coming back, but I love so what I want to know now is did you notice any differences in where you were in the way things are as opposed to here? Is there anything that makes sense that they're doing across the pond that we do that doesn't that would make sense here? I don't know.
Yeah,
Does that make
public
sense?
transportation.
Yeah.
Actually investing in supporting public transportation is it was a really noticeable,
Okay.
and having well subsidized, not free all the time, but well subsidized trains, like a rail system that was able to go all the way all across Scotland via rail system and be able to see so much of the country. And everything was really on time and really efficient because they had the infrastructure to make it happen. Now, of course, there have been those the strikes, the over there, especially when we were in England. There was a lot of travel that was affected by striking. But at the end of the day, the critical lines are still available, and it was so easy for us to go through multiple cities in the UK without having a car, without needing one, between busing and just walking. Like so many people would walk everywhere. And
I love
it
that.
was a really stark difference culturally from the United States, where everyone drives, first of all, because where things are more spread out here in general, but even in the city, a
Right.
lot of people drive because they're even the cities that we consider having good public transportation pale in comparison to a lot of European cities. So that's something for us to kind of chew over, especially I
Agreed.
mean, responsibly in the age of COVID and everything, but the ways that we can improve accessibility of our cities and in between our cities too, to the public who don't, especially considering how high gas prices are and everything. It's just being able to give them another option and investing in that for our benefit. That was one thing that stood out. Not the only thing, but the one that popped to mind first when you asked the question.
That's funny. I had this thought that cars didn't naturally develop because we needed them. I think cars developed because somebody sold them. And
Yeah.
like our country could have just gone in a different direction if the subway salesman or the train salesman had been better than Henry Ford, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we did have, I mean, for the longest time, for decades, rail was the only way to go long distances.
Hmm.
And then I don't know, I really just don't know the history. Maybe Jeffrey knows more. But the concept that the modern city in America was built around the car and walking, as opposed to having a lot of public transport available. I mean,
Right.
the New York City, LA, they have their subway systems and everything, but it's really not something that is well invested in. That is so
Right.
useful for millions of people, especially look going through London. I mean, could you imagine if the London did not have an efficient or even any kind of functioning underground and everyone had to go by car, the city would just not function. The
Of
city would
course not.
go
Yeah.
to a standstill. So, anyways, Jeffrey, how long do we have you for? And I apologize for the misunderstanding about the timing. I believe you are muted. I see your
You are
lips moving.
muted.
Probably another 20 minutes, and then I definitely will have to get off. So,
That's
Okay,
fine. Then
yeah,
I will give you the next 20 minutes.
excellent.
all right. So, monkeypox, Dan. This is
Hey.
This is an interesting one just because, I saw that I want to say it was the WHO is looking to have it declared a pandemic. Um, so it doesn't feel like COVID in a lot of ways where, when we started seeing cases, with COVID, we didn't have good testing. We didn't have a great foundational knowledge, I would say, publicly as to how it was going to spread and how quickly it was going to go. Monkeypox, however, we understand a lot more about monkeypox than we understood about COVID. And I would say that, there's probably good reasons as to why we understand more about monkeypox, but you've had, poor messaging from the looks of it, real difficult vaccine distribution. And on top of that, the public messaging behind it has also been not so great, where, it's kind of, there's being a lot of comparisons and a lot of broadcasting drawn back to the old 1980s. It's just men, fucking men. So, monkeypox, Dan, take it away.
All right. Well, there's a lot of interesting detail about like the you brought up all the little small things that are coming up, but I think I want to take a step back and look at the bigger picture of this. So it's actually based on a paper that I read this morning in the journal Nature, which is one of the most prestigious journals in science. And it really was emphasizing the concept that this is going to be the norm. And by this, I mean weird infections emerging and spreading throughout the developed world. And because of climate change that is forcing habitat relocation of different species from which microbial infections we don't know about can spill over into humans, habitat destruction from deforestation, population growth, all these things are moving in a direction where we're going to keep seeing the emergence of new infections at a faster and faster rate. And even though in this case, monkeypox, this infection is something that we know about, the circumstances in which it is spreading are definitely very different from what we had expected. And when I say we had expected, back when I was doing my training in infectious disease microbiology and public health, in multiple of my classes on virology and epidemiology, we talked about, what could be the next big spillover pandemic, and monkeypox was a front runner for that. Like that was, I remember a lot of journal clubs and discussions about, being prepared for this, considering how closely related it is to smallpox and how devastating that had been for nearly all of human history, and people being worried about it. Of course, this was pre-COVID, but we had some understanding of how monkeypox was kind of how it worked, and this is different, right? It's spreading outside of the United States, throughout the United States in a much faster way than we expected. Historically, when monkeypox has come to the United States, it's been under very different circumstances. It also seems to be spreading much more rapidly than we were expecting. And we did know that it could spread through sexual transmission, but oddly enough, it seems like what we know so far is that it's almost exclusively sexual transmission at this point. And there's a huge caveat to that, which you mentioned, the testing, vaccine rollout, the logistics of the monkeypox response have not been as good as we'd hoped there would be, especially considering everything we thought we'd learned from COVID. And I know you're a data guy, I want to point you to a particular point of data. So the CDC is routinely updating its website and posting out press releases on monkeypox cases throughout the United States. And what we had seen for most of, was a gradual increase. We have a couple more cases, like daily case counts, like 2 this day, 3 this day, 4, whatever, going up. Last week, there was an announcement from several different commercial laboratories that they were going to start doing monkeypox testing. It wasn't just going to be like the public health laboratories that are publicly funded, the CDC and such. And then just a few days after those announcements rolled out, the CDC gave an update where instead of like 10, 15, 20 cases, they announced in one day 476 confirmed cases. So if you look, it looks like a hockey stick, right? The case count, right? And what's really alarming about that is that it's very clearly a function of we have more testing available and more people getting tested, and more people are testing positive. Now, when you see that, what that means is that we were woefully under-testing beforehand. It doesn't mean that it went from 30 to 476 in a single day. It's that we expanded our testing capacity, and now we know, wow, it's spread much, much further than we expected it to be. So monkeypox is going to be the next epidemic. It already is the next epidemic in the United States because we have fallen behind on testing, and the data that just came out on Friday from the CDC proved that. So how is this going to affect a lot of? It's going to be a lot of stigma against the gay community, the men who have sex with men, or MSM community, as we use in public health, because that's most of the cases. But as we know with HIV, as we know with other infections, just because it starts in one particular group that we like to stigmatize doesn't mean it's not going to spread to other people, right? We know that monkeypox doesn't just spread through sexual transmission; it spreads through respiratory droplets, just like a cold or flu or COVID. Contact with body fluids, that's not just COVID, that's not just sexual transmission, excuse me. It has the potential to go very far. And we have a vaccine stockpile that we could use. We have things rolling out. But if it really does spread extremely rapidly, that in a way that we just have not accounted for, which is likely, it's going to be very hard for us to keep up with the pace of the demands for those resources and therapeutics and vaccines that, yeah, we have them available, but we're already behind the eight ball on that one. So that's kind of my general thoughts on where monkeypox stands, and my general disappointment that it seems like we haven't learned enough from 2 years of COVID to apply it to another situation, another epidemic, especially when we know that this is going to be the future. This is going to be the norm. And how many more of these outbreaks are we going to have before we start getting things right?
So then that brings me to the next question. We used to vaccinate for pox in various forms and polio in various forms. And we got to the point where we pretty much eradicated smallpox, and I think we actually have eradicated it
It is
outside of.
eradicated. It is the only infectious disease in history that we have officially eradicated. Polio is very close, but not quite.
So, which brings the question then, with monkeypox, since we have a playbook from smallpox, what is the likelihood that we look at, implementing that playbook? I know that would require vaccination, a vaccination push that, ultimately we saw fail with COVID because it got so politicized. But what does that potentially look like? Vaccination for not just people who have been exposed, but mass public in general, if we're looking to stop this.
I think the playbook for any kind of vaccination campaign is I don't want to say largely the same. It does depend on the disease, who you target first, how you prioritize, how you roll things out. It does differ from disease to disease. But the fundamental thing that we need to remember is that with every vaccination campaign, it starts with buy-in, like really good buy-in. And the reason why the smallpox eradication was in fact an eradication and not a major reduction was because the mass vaccine campaign across the world was something that was just embraced by everybody. The Soviet Union, the United States were on board for it. Like the Soviet Union and the United States cooperated on a vaccine campaign for smallpox. How huge is that? Now compare that to today, right? Everyone had their squabbles. There was a lot of woe and sadness and war and violence and other issues happening during the eradication effort, but everyone united and rallied around the motivation to eradicate smallpox. We're just not in a position right now to have that global unity. If we did, I feel like we've had a lot of issues on climate change already resolved or starting to be seriously resolved in a way we're just not seeing. We don't have global unity that is required to do something similar for monkeypox as it is for smallpox. And it's not just going to be monkeypox. It's going to be more and more. How many times have I come on this show and talked about COVID, saying COVID's not going to be the worst pandemic we see in our lifetimes, right? I've said this before, and this is just monkeypox might not be it because it seems to have a fairly low mortality rate.
And a stupid name, by the way.
Well, yeah, I mean, came from monkeys basically. So there's the smallpox and the monkeypox, right? It kind of sticks. It's kind of effective, I think.
And we're never going to get buy-in if we stigmatize it to one group. That was the point.
Exactly. Exactly. No, there's no. Yeah, what happened with HIV is we in the United States, 10 years went by more without us really having a serious centralized campaign where we took it seriously in the United States, and now it's still really gone really well, and it's taken 30 years. It took 30 years for us to really get HIV to something that we know is manageable with a really good drug scheme, to have the PrEP, the prophylactic antiviral drugs, right? It takes decades, right? And that's just the time span that we're on when we don't have universal buy-in from the start. So, I mean, I know you asked Jeffrey about what is the playbook. I'm not trying to sound like a politician and answer the question I want you to ask, but the playbook is we need a lot more buy-in than we're seeing. And once that happens, once everyone wants to come to the table and say this is a common goal, a lot of the rest gets figured out, I don't want to say quickly, but much more efficiently. And we're just not
So
seeing that. I don't think we're ever going to see that with any emerging infection until the big one, which COVID
Mm.
was not.
So with now with monkeypox though, sometimes what we see is that, there's more buy-in when something tends to be like disfiguring more so than lethal. Nobody wants to look ugly, but the when it seemed like COVID was one of those things where, if it wasn't going to disfigure you, it wasn't necessarily a concern. Now, smallpox, and we knew how bad it could mess with people. We knew how lethal it was. We knew how ugly it looked. Chickenpox is another one where it's like, I mean, when you look at how lethal chickenpox was, I mean, it was stupid low, something like 1 in 100,000 maybe. Um, but with monkeypox, we know that it's a little bit more lethal than that, but it is disfiguring. Um, so when it comes to vaccination, have we kind of looked at this as a, rather than, I know that there's always the hope that we can use less vaccine than, we ultimately want to,
Mm.
but have we looked at this in a light of, rather than sit down at this point and go, yeah, no, let's just try to push it out just far enough. Have we decided to sit down and go, you know what? Let's get out ahead of this and try to make the vaccine as widely available as possible.
Like Ebola, right?
Yeah, I mean, that always should be the goal for public health is try to get the most resources available to control as much disease as efficiently as possible. But the problem that goes right back to what I kind of opened with was the testing issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
The hockey stick that we have seen in daily case counts shortly after the announcement of rollout of additional testing just shows that we're so far behind. We know from the data that we have that it is, you know, there's a lot of spread within the MSM community, right? We know that that's happening. But where is it spreading that we're not seeing? We don't know
Right.
that because we're already behind on the testing. How frequently is it? And monkeypox, it looks like, I mean, it's not like the bubonic plague where if you survive, you have these massive like 4 or 5 inch like buboes that just disfigure you permanently. It's a rash that gets kind of like pussy for a little bit, purulent rather, and moves on right over time. It's not really permanent. So we don't people might not be aware of what they're thinking of for monkeypox. We don't know what's going on
Mm.
because it's not being prioritized. It's not being communicated about. With COVID, I know there were issues with COVID, but we knew about COVID pretty early on, and we had a lot of public attention on it. And when the first cases started happening in the United States, we fell behind it, but we already had a public awareness of what the disease could look like. And I think, yeah, with the argument of yeah, it could be disfiguring. Well, it's not permanently disfiguring, or in most cases, it's not. And we already don't know where else it's spread, so we can't possibly get out ahead of something that we don't know
Mm.
when all we know is that we're really far behind based on this recent data just from Friday. And what I really wish would be happening is that everyone should be saying alarm bells are going off. Look at what's going on. This case count means that we are way behind. But not even the CDC is doing that, right? There's not really a unified message on saying we are behind. Here's a state of emergency. We need help. This is happening, right? No, nothing like that. Not just in the mainstream news media, but not even in the people who are in charge of this they're not ringing the alarm bell nearly hard enough. So yes, it's a disfiguring disease, but we're already so far behind that people might not even recognize what the disfigurement might look like, and we don't even know who those people might even be because we don't know who their contacts might have been because we're
So,
so far behind.
so for me as a data scientist, one of the things that I always have to recognize is when we see jumps in curves, there are two reasons that there's a jump in a curve or a fall in a curve. Number one is that you are in control of what the action is, and you are judging the action and what happens next. Or you are studying something and when you see a jump or a fall, it's because there's something that you don't see that has happened, and now you're trying to find it. So it's like a proactive versus reactive. I'm causing this, so I expect this, or I am trying to find something and now I'm finding this. So at this point, now that you're seeing a large jump in the curve, it feels like when you start to see stuff like that, that there should be a much bigger response than just trying to target, maybe 1 to 2 levels out of degrees of separation in order to potentially vaccinate, but more
Hmm.
so it's like we're seeing this, it's time to get fucking serious about this and maybe look more towards a broader public response rather than a limited targeted response.
Yeah,
I a
contact
100%
tracing
agree.
worked, right?
Contact tracing, it didn't work nearly. Contact tracing is a great tool for when you have a contained or mostly contained disease. When you
Right.
know who's been exposed and you've got to quarantine people, like that whole strategy works really well. If you have a very high confidence that the ring that you've put around the potentially infected population covers the entirety of the potentially infected population.
Right.
That makes sense, right?
Yep.
If you see these 1,000 people might have been infected, and you're looking for maybe 100 cases, and you're very confident that somewhere in those 1,000 you have the 100 true cases of the disease, then contact tracing is a really effective tool. It's containment.
Hmm.
But what we talk about in public health is, or the public health language, what Jeffrey's talking about is switching from a containment focused strategy to a mitigation focused strategy. And
Right.
with COVID, we spent too much time trying to do containment. And yes, we
Gotcha.
do case investigations, and especially it helped with especially like with my work in long-term care facilities, when there were individual cases that started in a long-term care facility and we knew other people were exposed. Contact tracing and specified response was really useful because the frame of reference you had was the long-term care facility of like maybe 50 to 100 residents and maybe 100 staff. Like that's
Mm.
kind of a large one, but you could put a box around the people who are potentially infected, and you limited your response to that box. The
Well,
data, the spike in data that I saw that we're talking about, that Jeffrey and I is asking
hmm
more about,
the
is a
hockey
function of
stick.
the fact that we don't know what that ring is. We cannot put a ring around the some section of the population and say we're pretty confident all of monkeypox is contained within this ring. We just don't know
Wow.
exactly
It's
where.
gone beyond that ring, is my
It's
point.
gone. It's gone way beyond that range. It's gone way
Hmm.
beyond that range already. And the reason why you see that hockey stick is because the true positives that were not detected, there were a lot of true positives that were not detected because we didn't have the testing capacity. It's not like we've all of a sudden seen every single case, and now every single case has absolutely exploded because we were contact tracing the whole
Right.
way. The CDC, in its press releases, which I have dug through, has actually admitted in tactful language that they have not been able to follow up with everyone that they actually had. Like they were not able to follow up with every case and close contact that they already were tracking. So even among the groups that we had already been testing before expanded testing happened and this hockey stick happened, the CD was saying, yeah, we're kind of falling behind. So now,
Mm.
how far behind are we, knowing that we just went from like 50 cases a day to 476 as an artifact of testing actually being available? And
Right.
that's just the first couple days of testing being available. What
And
happens when it
again,
gets rolled out more?
those cases were there. You can just now see them, which
Exactly.
means
That's a really great way to phrase it.
if you tested more people, you would see even more.
Yes. Yeah, it's a function of testing being available. You don't know what you're looking for because you don't have a spyglass large enough to see the whole picture.
Right. You don't have the black light. You can't see
Yep.
all the sperm on the walls in the hotel.
Mm. That's
Oh,
an
don't get
image.
me started. Oh man, that hits me right in the feels, the visceral feels as a certified infection preventionist and environmental health sanitarian. Oh God.
Yeah. I've been watching a
Uh,
lot of Hotel Impossible.
So,
But just to bring it down for people to understand, the only reason that we know about the cases is because we tested them and we were looking for them. That hockey stick was shorter before because we just weren't looking for them. But at
yeah.
some point, if you tested everybody in America, you would find the true amount, and it wouldn't be everybody, but it wouldn't be nobody.
right.
Yeah, and I'd be willing to bet that if we were to magically get everybody tested tomorrow, and then we did the studies of who was infected, I guarantee you the MSM community that is the overwhelming majority of known cases right now, they would not be nearly as high a percentage. I bet that monkeypox is spread far and wide outside of that community already because we already
Yeah.
have a few cases that we're tracking that it's already outside that community. But how many people are not being tested have already been exposed and they don't even know
Right.
it because we don't even know. They don't even know to get a test. They don't even know if they want to get a test, if one's available. And if one's available, what's the turnaround time for that coming back? and being positive, and how like the timeline. This is the fundamental failure with case investigation, contact tracing, right? With COVID, someone gets sick, gets the sniffles, gets a fever, cough, shortness of breath. They go get a test. It takes them 2 days for them to get a test turned around, in which case they've already probably exposed a couple of people. Then the
Right.
test is positive. Then that gets pushed to the local public health laboratory. And 24 to 48 hours after that, you're already at like day 4, day 5, somebody gives a call to the original case, right? Who actually
Hmm.
tested positive. 5 days behind,
Hmm.
is so much time to identify what's going on. And in the meantime, who
Right.
knows who else has been exposed? If we had immediate testing, immediate knowledge, like the rapid antigen test, and a much more effective strategy like that, we would be able to do case investigation in like less than 2 days. That's when it's really useful, right? We need a much faster time, turnaround time for that. And monkeypox is already probably that level, and that level of distance of like 4, 5, 6, 7 days
Mm.
until we have identified an individual case, and who knows what happens then. So I'm ringing a lot of alarm bells, right now.
So
And I know
now,
that Jeffrey is up against the clock, so I don't want to
yeah.
take away too much time.
So then the next question really is what does vaccine production and uh, disbursement look like for the smallpox, monkeypox vaccine? Because I know we have a limited supply as it is, but how do you meet the demand for something like this? Is this something that's easy to tool up and get moving, or
Right.
is this something where, in order to get the number of doses that you would need to effectively control this, we're months behind?
Yeah, we're behind. So the Strategic National Stockpile of vaccines is designed to backfill, and kind of rush to the front lines of containment focused strategies, right? So we talk about containment versus mitigation. Oh crap, we have 5 people who might have been exposed to Ebola in Texas. Activate the Strategic National Stockpile, send 1,000 vaccines down there, and backfill because they don't know what's going on, while those people are contained by local public health authorities. That's how the Strategic National Stockpile is supposed to work. It's not just supposed to magically be able to vaccinate everybody. We have hundreds of thousands of vaccines available, but we live in a country of hundreds of millions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there've already been, the federal government has already assigned contracts for to increase production of approved smallpox, monkeypox vaccines. And I'm encouraged by that, but we don't really know. With this is a new strain that's spreading differently. It looks phylogenetically like if you look at the actual genetics of it, it looks pretty different from the previous monkeypox strains that the vaccines were developed against. Right, we're seeing how well that's working with Omicron, with COVID right now. How effective are those vaccines going to be? We don't really know. But the main point to stay on topic is the Strategic National Stockpile is not our answer. Right, we need to have anticipated this to start mass producing vaccines and start pushing messaging saying, I know we just are still with COVID. Another one's coming, and this is going to be the norm for the next insert years, right?
Hmm.
This is what we got to do. We're rolling out vaccines. Here's the high priority groups, right? We're already months behind on the decision making for the rollouts, much less the actual production and the rollout itself. So we're in a tough spot. So all I can say is, look, if you have any symptoms of any respiratory disease, stay home and let people know that you might have had in close contact with, right? Just let them know. If you don't know what it is, if you test for COVID, you're not sure, and if it's negative, still stay home, still make sure people are aware, because if they get sick, they need to be aware of. That's the one major message I have, because we're trying to spin up a lot of federal level responses that's going to take time. And if you individually do your responsibility to try to stay home if you're sick, to not to isolate, to wear the mask if you have to go out in public, all that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do the right thing, because if everyone does a little bit of the right thing a little more, it'll make the federal response a lot more effective in the long run.
Agreed.
All right, guys, I got a bolt, so I will
Cool.
catch you later.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I love you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Jeffrey. Bye.
Awesome. So I've had a question for you in my head for
Yeah.
years, and I've never been able to just address it. And so what I think people have a problem with education. I think they have a problem with learning, and I think they have a problem with learning how to learn. And what always fascinates me about you is you're an academic, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, my recovering academic.
Recovering. So, but what you do is you love to learn. You love to know. You educate yourself in different fields. You take different classes, not because you're forced to, as much as I think you kind of enjoy knowing more and learning more. And I think that's something that people they just don't know how to do that. So what I've always wanted to ask you, how how did you begin learning? Did your parents encourage it? Did you just have this thirst for it? Was there books and opportunities available to you that led you in that direction? What made you want to go education?
Discovery Channel. Right.
Okay.
When I was a kid, so background, both my parents have doctorates in various forms of chemistry, right? So they're
Okay.
PhDs. So they've always really valued education and benefited directly from it. And my dad is
Okay.
not only the first person to get a PhD in his family, he was the first person in his family to graduate high school.
Nice.
So he really valued um, the impact that education had because it really because his parents who did not have the good fortune and had rough lives, honestly, but they really encouraged and set aside a lot of time for him to get educated, and he pushed forward to make that, be successful. And my mom largely was similar, right, where she was the first person in her family to go to get a doctoral degree. Both of them had that background, and so from very early on, they said, you know, you are going to get educated, and it's not just going to be relying on school to do the education thing, and
Right.
then I'm going to come back home, and then it's over, right? They were constantly putting time and effort into educating us. We had dinner time conversations, right? There was a table with me, my parents, and my brother where we sat down and we talked about stuff going on. And in the evening, instead of letting me play video games. Like, I love a good video game. I've been playing some Assassin's Creed Black Flag recently.
Nice.
Um, but when I was a kid, instead of playing video games, I didn't get in. I was too young for smartphones back then. But they
Right.
sat me down in front of educational television. Right, Steve Irwin was one of my heroes. Nigel Marven, Jeff Corwin. I grew up with that generation of like the modern naturalists who
Right.
presented informational content in a fun way. Kratz Creatures and Zaboomafoo, right? That was what my childhood was. It wasn't just the distract the kids so I can drink some wine cartoons.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important for me to recognize there's a lot of privilege that's wrapped up in that because first of all, my parents, they had the education, they had the degree, they had worked really hard, but they had created an opportunity for my brother and I to have time to for a time to spend with us where they weren't constantly trying to find an extra job to make ends meet, or
Sure.
we
No,
actually
I
had a
get that.
television at home, right? I think it's important to acknowledge that privilege. But as my generation starts becoming parents, I think it's really important for us to remember that you can find educational content more and more easily every single day. This is before YouTube. This is before smartphones. This is before social media. And I know that social media has a rough context, but you can find sections of it that are so engaging and so educational. So if you
Agreed.
start your kids off just by the philosophy of learning doesn't stop when you leave school and when your homework's done, and
Right.
constantly try to support their learning and their growth outside of it, they will find the resources that they want to pursue their next interest, be a professional, personal career, whatever. So
Okay.
that's a bit of a long-winded answer, but how did I start getting interested in learning? My parents carved out time in their schedules and forced me to carve out schedules time in my schedule to make it happen outside of school, and it
Okay.
became a habit. It became a good habit. So
So
that's
it
my
was time and conversation.
it was time, conversation, and a lot of dedication from parents that really cared about it from when I was a very young age.
Right. Okay. Because I think even a parent with two jobs that connects with their child for a half an hour or an hour can ask the question, tell me about your homework, so that the parent might take the stance of wanting to learn from the child. And in
Yeah.
that, I
Tell me
think,
what you learned is a great way. Teaching others is the most
right,
valuable way to learn yourself. So,
right. So I think just opening up the opportunity, if you're going to see your child, you have a chance to say, what was your homework about, or clean the dishes. You can either nag them or encourage them with the time that you have. And maybe that's all it takes is just show that it's important to you, show that it's an interest that you would want, and so that's something you want for your kids. The same way that I think an artist, a musician teaches their child at an early age to play the guitar, not because it's important, but because it's important to the parent.
mhm. No, I
It
agree with that. And
okay, cool.
it doesn't just have to be like science and math and school subjects, right? It could
Right,
be, I don't know, think of a father who is a mechanic working on his car, right? 8-year-old Johnny
right,
comes out, it's like, "Hey, let me show you something. I want to show you something." Obviously being safe, right? It just get them learning something. It doesn't matter what the content is, it's about the process of building
right,
those synapses, problem solving, being aware of the fact that you can keep your brain turned on outside of school, right?
right.
And being engaged in certain things, right? That's
And you
and debriefing and doing like after action, like, hey, what went well in school today? What didn't go well? Hey, heard you got a D on
yes.
your test. What was wrong, right? A lot of it comes down from parenting, and that's why I really support like, you know, policies that encourage healthy families, right? That's kind of a lot of my political ideology is based on, we want families to be robust because robust families support well-rounded, well-educated, safe, and well-adjusted children who are going to go off and do great things. And
Right.
and when stuff doesn't happen like that, a lot of things happen that are outside the kid's control. The kid gets put into a lot of situations that are just really rough, and bad stuff happens. Not just criminal behavior, but not being able to not being able to, rise up through socioeconomic status, not being able to find their own success, finding a purpose, right? The
Right.
mental health issues, right? It's not just, oh, these parents are bad, so these kids are criminals. There's so much more ripple effect that comes out of that. So really dedicate your time to your kids' self-development and encouragement. That's my message from that.
I agree with that. And what I think is important is little Johnny might watch you work on the car, but you never know what little Johnny's going to pick up on. He might be the next chemist that wants to know how to better work the ignition system, or he might be the metallurgist that says, I like the way these tools feel. I want to learn how to work with metal, or he might become a mechanic. And so
Yeah.
the options open up when you offer ways to learn. I was always a people watcher, and it didn't take a lot of money and education to learn what people were going to do based on what they've done before. And but my mom always she always debated me about everything and anything. And when I won the debate, she would switch to my side and make me pick the losing side till I won. That's how I got to go outside.
Yeah,
She wouldn't.
that's great. That's a great way to
Right,
engage, right? Learning how to support an argument with evidence. I remember one phrase. It's
right.
burned into my memory. When I was a kid, I would like ramble a lot, and my parents would stop me, and my mom especially, and she'd say, "Stop. Write me a paragraph under the heading of what I want my mom to know, or what I want to do this weekend, or what is going wrong in my bedroom that, whatever the situation was." She was like,
Hmm.
stop, take a pause, articulate your thoughts. And it wasn't like literally writing a paragraph, but kind of encouraging me to think in the concept of, here is the paragraph topic sentence, then follow it up with information to support your argument, and then wrap it up with a key conclusion, right? If you can
Right.
learn to communicate that, but she didn't just let me ramble and say, "Oh, that's nice, honey," while she was looking at her phone.
Right.
She listened and said, "Okay, this kid's rambling. Let's correct this, because if he learns this now, it's going to be a lot easier later." And to this day, my mom and I have really good communication. And sometimes I'll do it to her back, and she'll laugh and be like, "I used to do that to you when you were a kid," because
Yeah.
it's so easy, but it's a great way to phrase it. And when I do it to my wife, she's a little annoyed, but it
It
sometimes
also
happens.
it
It's
it
really
pulls the
valuable.
it
So
pulls the ocean it pulls the emotion out of the debate though, right? You're
yeah,
feeling this emotion and you're saying it with emotion, and she's saying, "Step back, take a breath, formulate your thoughts, and come out speaking in a way that people can understand."
yeah, articulate your speech, and it's amazing how well the world unfolds for you. But yeah,
I love that.
really prioritizing, taking the time for your kids, to encourage them to want to seek out education, to give them those opportunities, to take the time for them, and to just really have your mind in the right place. Mistakes happen. We always make mistakes, but I really fundamentally believe that is a really critical component to the future of our societies. Like, how well are parents going to support kids who want to be better, and want to be strong, and want to be successful, and want
Right.
to learn about the world around them and engage, right? The worst thing that
Mhm.
happens to a lot of people is they just feel cut off in the world. It's like, whatever, what's the point anymore? That's depression.
Right.
That's depression. That's crime. That's mental health. That's deadbeat jobs. That's a lot of non-success comes from that. So try to grow that out of your kid early on, and it'll be really great. Sorry, you got me rambling. I should write write a paragraph under the content, right?
No. Well,
That's kind of my thoughts.
I sprung that on you because I wanted all of that because people will decide from that what was the important message in it, you know? I like that.
Yeah,
What I'm taking away is parents just need to train their children to teach. And I like that. My mom always said, explain it to me, teach it to me. What did you learn? Like, what one day I was going to go out with my friends and my mom said, that's fine, but before you go, just tell me where's the one place where the American flag isn't lowered when a president died. We were stuck in the house for 4 hours before somebody said the moon. You know?
yeah.
And then she was like, thanks, bye, and she let us go. And it was
There you
those
go.
little lessons that I hated, but now I kind of appreciate, you know? And I love thinking of the family dynamic of people educating each other instead of yelling criticisms back and forth.
Oh yeah, I fully agree with it. And listening, taking the time to listen and learn, because you might learn something from somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, everybody's knowledgeable at something, even if it's a struggle or a pain or an event that they went through, and they can help other people with it. But if we're yelling at each
Yeah,
other, we'll just never know.
absolutely.
So, getting back on, is there anything we should be worrying about with COVID? I know there's new variants coming out, and there's a lot being said about the variants, and I'm not quite sure. We're running out of a stockpile for vaccines. This is all interesting to me, but is that okay? Is this variant bad? Should we be worried?
Yeah, I think that the general message with COVID, knowing this crow was coming up, I decided to do a little bit of homework because that's just how I roll.
I
And
know,
I
I know.
I want you. I know you like numbers. I know Jeffrey likes numbers, and I figured you'd appreciate this. So I think one of the main narrative that's happening right now is people want COVID to be over. They're kind of
Hmm.
done with COVID because it's pretty mild, and Omicron's not so bad anymore, and we're not having such a bad time with it, right? So
Mild,
okay,
mild,
let's
mild for some. It's still
yeah.
mild for some.
I mean, that's the narrative. I don't agree with it, but that's the narrative. So
Right.
let's put some numbers. Let's bring out some numbers and see what's going on. So this is from CDC data, right?
Yay.
Um, so obviously, when it comes to mild infection, whatever, right? A lot of people getting sick with COVID. I think there's a mass undercount of how many people are actually getting COVID, right?
Wow.
But let's look at hospitalizations and death rates, right? So since COVID emerged in in the United States, we've had rates of hospitalization and ICU admission and deaths that have followed like peaks and waves or whatever, right? Under different
Hmm.
circumstances, right? What's been really interesting to see is that since mid-April of this year, it has been kind of a slow burn increase. Before, and like our we were doing an average of like 10,000 people hospitalized per day. Now we're up over 34,000, but it's been a very
Wow.
slow, gradual increase over time.
Okay.
And for context, the peak of our last winter wave with the first wave of Omicron was 150,000 people each day
Right. And
hospitalized. So just kind of put it,
we have about 120,000 hospital beds in the nation. I learned that during
yeah,
COVID.
yeah. So it was real. It is much lower for sure than it was pre.
Hmm.
Okay, and since that time, early end of April, early May, the average death rate has oscillated somewhere between like on average 300 to 400 deaths per day, right? So that's kind of the national average. Again, for context, in the peak of the winter wave, we were already at 2,700 per day. Now, what was the original narrative that kind of just downplayed COVID? It was a comparison to the flu. Oh, it's just not so bad, but it's like kind of the flu, right? It's just the
Right.
flu again. All right. So for the 2019-2020 flu season, which is the last one before COVID emerged, the estimates for the CDC were 24,000 to 62,000 deaths over the course of that period
That's
from
right.
flu, specifically from flu. So if you do the math, and again, that's definitely in a peak, but if you just do a cumulative average across that entire time, the low to high estimates are anywhere between 113 per day to 291 per day, right? So the worst estimate, the high end estimate from the CDC about flu deaths just before we had COVID, the worst was 291 per day.
Hmm.
Probably a little bit higher than in the actual peaks in the worst months of it, right? But the key point is like right now in an era where we're kind of like over the pandemic and people think Omicron is mild or whatever, our baseline for death rate from COVID is still higher than the average death rate from the flu was just before COVID. And we're
Correct.
like off season for respiratory viruses, and this is kind of the lowest it's been in a while, right?
Exactly.
Where we're at, and this kind of ties back into what I was talking about earlier with monkeypox, is that right, we're entering kind of a new era where more infections are going to become more common, and new emerging viruses and new emerging pathogens are going to come out, and they're going to increase death rates, right? We've kind of flipped on our heads the society where, before, like up until the age of sanitation, right, the
Right.
overwhelming majority of death was from infectious disease, and then now it's like chronic non-communicable disease. We're kind of seeing this uptick in in infectious disease, like mortality and morbidity in this country. But
Right.
what's interesting is that we're compensating for that mentally as a country by saying, it's not so bad, right? It's not as bad as it could be, or it was worse before, so we don't really care. I'm kind of done with it. But the reality is, the data show that the death rates are going to continue to climb. They're continuing to climb right now, just not just from COVID, but as we have more and more and more viruses emerge through spillover events, as we know are going to happen, the death rates from these infectious diseases are just going to compound, and that's going to be
Right.
our reality if we're not careful and we don't really take this seriously. So that's kind of where my general thoughts are on COVID. Is that it
Watch
might
out.
not be as bad as it was just now, but consider what you're thinking when you say, "Oh, it's not so bad." Like, what is your baseline for not so bad now compared to where it was pre-pandemic, and what
Yeah,
you
because
kind of
what
accept?
you're comparing is the peak of flu against the average of COVID.
The peak of flu averaged across from like October through the winter,
Right.
compared to July, which is the exact opposite of when flu season is supposed to
Exactly.
be for COVID. And what we think, this is like the trough, the bottom level of, this is not bad at all. We're already way worse than we're peak flu season in terms of illness from COVID. It's really, really nasty. So
That's really a shame. We
consider,
spent we spent so much time building an infrastructure perfect for battling infectious diseases, and now nobody wants to really care about infectious disease.
yeah, it is, it, unfortunately, yeah, I think you're right.
I mean,
I don't want to say no one. There's definitely people who definitely care,
right, of
and
course.
people who want to be responsible, do the right thing, and at least just care. But it's interesting to see how quickly the narrative shifts to something that is way worse than it was before, because we just assume that that's okay now because of the trauma that we've endured as a country throughout COVID,
I
the
agree.
pandemic so far. It's kind of sad to think about, but I think it's important for us to kind of raise that flag and make sure people are aware. It's like, check your baseline. What is your baseline now to where it was 2 years ago?
Yeah, and in what is it, 2.5 years, we lost 1 million people.
Yeah,
That's not the flu. That's something bad.
yeah. And
Yeah.
oh goodness only knows what's going to happen. So that's kind of where my mind is at with
Okay.
with COVID, excuse me.
With COVID. And does 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 this copy paste infectious vaccine creation help us with the monkeypox? Is that going to make production of it quicker?
Um, well, one of the major issues with rollout of the COVID vaccines is that none of them were, um, they were all brand new, right? None of them were emergency
Right.
authorized. None of them were approved because they were completely new, and we had to test them, and it took months to
Right,
test
right.
them, right? And that was really brutal. Um, but with the monkeypox vaccines, a lot of the monkeypox vaccine, there is one that's already FDA approved and has been for forever.
Okay.
So we can fast track. We can just be in straight up production and distribution. But with production distribution, you have to have the buy-in. You have to have the people who want to pay for it. You have to have logistics to
Sure.
transport and distribute. Right. The
Okay.
COVID vaccine effort was incredible. It was absolutely spectacular. I mean, there were definitely issues with it, but think about how many people signed up to volunteer at vaccination clinics. How many people, like
Right.
the whole infrastructure that emerged out of nowhere because we had a national emergency that people rallied around, controversially to some, but on the whole, what we did for COVID was completely unprecedented in terms of what we did as a public health response. And now
Agreed.
compare that to, oh, we can just make a bunch of monkeypox vaccines. Okay, how are we going to distribute them? Who are we going to distribute them to? Well, who are we going to distribute them to? It's dependent on who has the disease. And if we don't have
Right.
enough tests, we don't know whose has it. Then how are we going to target those properly, right? We can target the people we know already has the disease, but how are we going to have the effective messaging and the logistics and the management and the buy-in and all the, and that's where public health really turns in from away from a conversation of what is the disease doing to what are we as people going to do about it. And that is much, much, much harder than, in my opinion, than the surveillance and the response and the case investigation and contact tracing and the
Right.
kind of the bread and butter of infectious disease epidemiology. It's how are we going to institute programs that are going to be effective long term? That's a huge, huge problem.
Okay. They were saying that the mRNA vaccines would open up the age of vaccine, so I was just wondering if that was something that would attack. I know there's older versions of vaccines. I didn't know if they were willing to update that to fit the new model of vaccines. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, so the mRNA platform, the that Moderna invented and
Hmm.
has been successfully, I don't know, copy pasted, whatever, but has been successfully adapted by Pfizer, right?
Right.
Not accusing Pfizer of any kind of plagiarism. They made their own different vaccine, but it was similar technology, right?
Hmm.
Um, the mRNA vaccine technology, that's a really powerful tool. We know that the vaccines are very effective. They're decently effective at stopping infection, and they're very good at reducing severity of symptoms, which at the end of the day is a major goal. We want to keep people out of the hospital. We want to keep people out of the
Right.
out of the grave, right? That's the goal.
People want to stay out of the hospital and the grave
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I hope so.
at a
uh,
fundamental individual level.
yes, yes, I fully agree.
Whether they care if you or I go to the hospital is another story.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But
But the main thing with
that's
that,
what we're working on, changing people for a better world. So,
yeah, for sure. That's why I love you guys. That's why I want to help
yeah.
keep the podcast up, right?
Thanks.
But anyways, so the mRNA vaccines, right? The old formulations we'd have, if we wanted to make vaccines based on mRNA technology for those viruses that we already have vaccines for, it
Right.
would be the same process of developing, doing the clinical trials, doing the testing, getting the approval or the authorization, and then rolling them out.
Right.
It's not just saying, oh, we could make an mRNA vaccine for this virus and it's already good. Like the technology has to be tested
Okay.
because just because it worked with one virus doesn't mean you can just do the exact same thing. In fact, it's impossible at the molecular level to do the exact same thing with a COVID mRNA vaccine and a say monkeypox mRNA vaccine that
Right.
might get developed. It's
Different virus
fundamentally different.
families.
In fact, we probably wouldn't even use RNA for um, monkeypox because COVID, the coronavirus family, is
Hmm.
they use the genetic material is RNA,
Right. Right.
and pox viruses like monkeypox, their genetic material is DNA, right? So
Wow.
the whole way that and it's not just DNA, but the replication mechanism, the way that they actually invade cells and make copies of themselves and make people
Right.
sick, completely different biology than the biology of coronaviruses,
Okay.
right?
So it's like
They're
vaccinating between a rhinoceros and a giraffe.
yeah, basically
Yeah.
yeah, same
Okay.
both viruses in terms of the context of their if you want to compare them to large herbivores in Africa,
I
right?
guess.
But how you would take down a giraffe versus taking down a rhinoceros is very, I don't know, maybe very different. I don't
That's
know. Ask a
cool.
hunter for it. But the point is, right, it's not just we could say the RNA vaccines are going to just solve all of our
They're not going to
problems,
fix
right?
everything.
It's this great innovation. I think there's going to be some more effective vaccines. I'm very excited to see what Moderna is doing with the universal flu vaccine based on RNA technology.
Right.
But at the end of the day, once the vaccine's approved, then the hard work comes in of how do we get this distributed? How do we get people to buy into it? How is it going to work in real life versus in the clinical trials? So
Right.
it does get funky.
I like
So
the
yes,
idea.
it's
I like the
optimistic, but
idea
it's
of
not a end all. Sorry, go ahead.
I get that. I like the idea of a multi-purpose vaccine because then you can kind of slip in newer vaccines without having to get the public approval. You can put it with your flu vaccine and just get vaccinated for that, COVID, monkeypox, all these other things at once. And I like that because it's easier to market here's your one vaccine over, okay, here's another vaccine to me.
Oh yeah, I I hope that could possibly be done. But I think just knowing I'm not an expert in vaccine formulations. There are amazing,
Right.
wonderful people who know way more than I do. But from what I do know from my training, I think it's going to be very difficult for us to do a lot of vaccines that combine um, uh,
Okay.
antigens for multiple ones. We have some that are successful, like the DTaP and Tdap vaccines
Right.
for tetanus, diphtheria, pertussis. That's multiple different pathogens. We have
Neat.
some that are successful, but it's never going to be the like one vaccine for 25 diseases that we just get and we're done, right? It's going to be a pattern, and new things are going to come out, new viruses that we don't really understand or have never seen before. It's going to happen, and we're going to have to account for that too. So there are
Don't you
lots of
wish?
positive things happening, and I think there's a lot of great technology, but at the end of the day, it is about people and how we address the human element of public health. That's always the kind of
Right.
the rate limiting step of the process.
I love that. Do you ever want just an aquarium for viruses?
No, because I know that I would, being as clumsy as I am, I'd probably knock it over and create another pandemic. So
I just want to go and see these viruses in real life. I wish there was a place where I could just go and see them in captivity instead of them destroying me before
uh,
we
there
recognize who
is.
they are, you know?
It's called a microbiology textbook. I'm very happy to make recommendations if you're interested.
I love that.
Some
Well, then
there's some really good ones that are there's some that are super grainy and technical and meant for people who've been experts in the field for years. But I've definitely come across a couple that are really good reads. That are they're still textbooks, right? You know, of
okay.
people who are back to school. But if you generally are interested in how some of these viruses work, I'm very happy to make some recommendations for you to do some reading there. You learn from the ground up and have a good understanding of it. Just let me know.
I just like learning, and viruses are going to be in my life probably for the rest of my life. And
Oh yeah,
you gotta think at a base level that it's a virus's planet, and we're just living in it. And so seeing the form and function of them is beautiful sometimes.
absolutely. It's
So
beautiful to think about, and if, like how does it work at a
right,
molecular cellular level? It's honestly really fascinating. And then you think about the human cost of it, and it's like there's the motivation. I think there's a lot of
right.
scientists. This is a hot take. I think there's a lot of scientists who care much more about the virus being cool inside the cell than the
Mm,
virus being really rough on the population.
that's sad. We'll get past
Yeah,
that though.
hopefully.
All right, I'll wrap up with one more thing because we're running out of time. Thank you for being here, by the way. That was my fault. That wasn't yours. Do you, is there a food that makes y'all happy? Is there a food in your house that makes you happy, helps your mental health?
There is. My wife makes amazing muffins. She
Ooh.
uses a mix of raspberries and blueberries, which is great. And she actually supplements some of the flour for vanilla protein powder. So you get like 8 to 10 grams
Ooh.
of protein in a muffin, and it's very filling. And it's a meal of a muffin really well. So instead of just feeling like you've carb loaded and you got to go sit in the couch and just vegetate for 2 hours after eating a delicious muffin, you feel kind of happily full from a protein based breakfast,
Yeah.
continental bakery item, especially when your wife makes it with love. That's my favorite. What about you?
I like the love. Right now, I'm just exploring knowing what's in my foods. Instead of I'm trying to, I think I had fructose malabsorption, so I was trying to lose fructose. So I was trying to learn about cornmeal and corn flour, and um I've really been into fruit. I try, my whole fridge this week is filled with fruit, grapes, oranges, melons of different kinds, and I cut it up, put it in
Nice.
there because even if I eat a bit of garbage, I know I can backfill with some great fruit, you know?
Sounds like we should get a good dietitian, like a registered dietitian on the show, and we can
I
have a full episode on
agree.
that. I would love that. I would love to listen and learn.
I tell my doctor every day, I need a nutritionist. I don't need a doctor. You can't fix what food could break, what food has broken. Let me fix myself, and then you can determine what's wrong with me. But you don't know if my intestines are swollen because of coffee or because of ulcerative colitis. So
That's
let's
what
get
we need. That's the allied health sciences coming together, right? The dietitians, the pharmacists, the
right.
public health professionals, right? It's not just about diagnosing a disease. It's understanding lots of different dimensions of health, and I think that's really valuable. So
That's what I
I'm gonna go
love
have
you
a
for.
muffin.
Go have a muffin. Give Marissa a hug. Tell her congratulations. I'm so happy you guys went to Iceland. I'm a little jealous about that. But you didn't go in time to see the ice castles being built in Iceland, so maybe we'll all go back and do a show from there.
We did go hiking on glaciers though, and that was really fun. That's
I
close enough
love
for
that.
me.
I love that for you. For Dan, for you being in the minutia of the pandemic for so long and putting your wedding aside for it, I love the fact that you took the time for yourself that way. For you both.
Uh,
So,
Thank you, my friend. I really appreciate that, and I appreciate everything you do to push out engaging and informative and supportive audio content to the masses. I'm a huge
love
fan
it.
of the show, and I'm always happy to come around and be here. So thank you for taking the time for an extra chat.
Of course, we're already scheduling our next meeting, so with
Oh,
you.
baby, I'm looking forward to it. Take care, my friend. Have fun.
Love you. Bye.
Bye bye.
And thank you for listening to Public Access America. My name is Jason. That's been Dan. Jeffrey left early. That was really neat. We got our schedule screwed up, but we got a bonus episode. And I really like that. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching the live stream. And check our podcast out every Sunday and Thursday on Spotify, Apple, Google Play, Player FM. For our disabled listeners, checked out Victor Reader. And hey, we just learned that we're on Podvine. So if you find us on Podvine, let us know on Twitter at Public Access Pod. Thank you for being here. Love you all. Have a great day.